Good evening. Time being 7 p.m. on March 13th, 2023. All members of the planning board being present, call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from February 13th, 2023. Oh, we have no minutes for this one, right?
No.
Okay. All right, so no minutes necessary. All right, so moving on to agenda item B1. Actually, you know what, before we go too far, just to let everybody in the audience know, item E, which is 18 Lumber Lane, and item J, which is 770 Main Street, both applicants have requested to be continued to our next meeting, so nothing will be heard on either of those. So if you're here for those, you're free to leave, you won't miss anything, we won't be doing anything with either of those, all right? Back to agenda item B1, which is committee reports. Any of the members have any committee reports they wish to make at this time?
All set, Mr. Chairman, on my end.
Mr. Chairman?
The
Oh, sorry.
Elementary School Building Committee met last week. They are still dealing with some small punch list and warranty items, which is typical for a major facility, which is what the school is. And the principal and the staff have had a few user requests for things like additional desks, furniture. Now that they're living in the building, they're seeing what the functionality of the building really is, and they made some requests. But generally, everything seems to be working well. We have about 6 to 8 months of commissioning, closeout, MSBA review, all of that, but we're looking very good in all those regards.
Excellent. All right. Moving on to agenda item B2, town planners report. Slaughter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a
Chairman?
couple of quick things here. Oh,
Sorry.
I'm sorry,
Please.
there are two people standing in the back, but there are two chairs right here. Oh, you know.
Okay. Ms. Slaughter?
thank you. First item I want to note is there is going to be a housing production plan presentation on Thursday, March 16th, so this week. We are going to be holding a virtual workshop from 5:30 to 6:30 via Microsoft Teams to discuss a recent housing survey conducted by NIMCOG and the Community Development Department, the housing production plan process, and how the town is going to be working towards better, more affordable housing. The town has been working with NIMCOG on the plan for the past couple of months, and it's going to focus on affordable housing, what kinds of housing development or redevelopment the town hopes to create, and how the town and its partners can work toward making sure all kinds of families and people can afford to live in Tewksbury. At the workshop, the NIMCOG housing planning team, along with town staff, will present findings from the survey and proposed action items to address local housing needs. Participants are encouraged to discuss possible strategies to create a vision for equitable, affordable housing in town. Links are for the workshop are on the town website under the news items, and if anyone has any questions, they're more than welcome to reach out to me directly. Next item of note, at the last meeting, we discussed the Lee House project, and I sent a letter to the owner of the project following our meeting, and I spoke with the owner last week regarding next steps for the project, and I, and the building commissioner are going to meet this Friday to discuss a plan forward, and then I'll update you folks as applicable. Next item, there were some updates to the stretch building code this year. The new residential code was effective on January 1st of '23, and commercial changes will take effect of July 1st of this year. The goal of these changes is to help reduce emissions and the energy demand in end uses through electrification, fuel switching, efficiency, and flexibility. Will anyone considering new construction or renovations should consult with a licensed architect about how to comply. The town has posted kind of a one-page cheat sheet on the community development page, just to kind of get some of the initial items and questions out of the way. But, you know, we always recommend that you work with a licensed architect to address those things appropriately. Last item, just a quick shout out to La Vita Dolce. They opened and had their soft opening last Saturday, March 4th, 1866 Main Street. Their official grand opening will be Saturday, March 25th. Their initial opening day left them sold out, so, you know, we welcome them to town, and we look forward to seeing them do more great things in the community. And last item of note, Eco Auto at 623 Main Street in the old Nissan dealership has scheduled their grand opening for this week, Friday and Saturday, March 17th and 18th from 12 to 2. They'll be open for regular business hours. I believe it's 8 to 8, but they're going to be focusing their grand opening activities between 12 and 2 both days. And, you know, all members are invited, all members of the community and the board are invited to visit them that day. That's all I have.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item B3, 1009 Livingston Street, as-built acceptance. Do we have anybody here for 1009 Livingston Street? Okay. Mrs. Fowler?
There were no additional submissions for 1009 Livingston Street or 255 Salem Street/Border Road. My understanding is both of those are still under review between the engineering department and the engineer of record, and they're working on revisions, ongoing. And we'll have a submission hopefully at the next meeting, if not the one after that.
All right, so then agenda item B3 and B4, we'll just leave till our next meeting.
Yep.
All right, moving on to agenda item C, 999 Whipple Road, continued from our 227 meeting.
Jeff, you need more chairs? No. Okay.
There we go.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I'm Kevin Hardiman, I'm the Public Works Director, here with Tony Westpizer from Weston and Sampson, who is our design engineer on the project.
Good evening. I do have a presentation, very short one, just to provide the board with a update on where we're at and what's been done since the last time we met. So this is the DPW and school maintenance project at 999 Whipple Road, continued from February 13th. Just to recap where we kind of ended last time, summary of permits required from the planning board. We're looking for a site plan approval. We were looking for a native plant species waiver as well as a parking spaces with dead-end aisle waiver. We no longer need the native plant species waiver, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. We're also looking for a major land disturbance permit from the planning board. And finally, from the zoning board of appeals, we needed a variance for existing accessory building, and I'll get into that in a moment as well. So as far as modifications that were made to the application and the permits that were submitted to the board, we did receive comments from the town engineer and the planner, and we've received letters from both that all comments have been addressed. And the modifications were also based on some discussions with the fire department. The modifications included shifting the entrance of the front parking lot. That's for fire apparatus turnaround. I'll have a very quick diagram of what that is in a moment. We added a bike rack. So as far as the shifting of the entrance, I'm going to zoom in on that portion of the slide. The entrance over onto the right, we're shifting to the middle so that fire apparatus could pull in and turn left or right, back up, making a three-point turn, and then pull straight out of the facility. They were feeling like they were a little bit stranded if the entrance was at that right side, and they were much in favor of this as a solution. And then this is what it looks like in the redesign, and then up in the top we have the bike rack. And then we removed the expansion of the existing employee parking lot. We did find that we did not need it. We were meeting the requirements of the bylaws without expanding that parking lot. So that part of the project is located in the lower right-hand corner of the site plan. And just to zoom in, the area shown in red is what we had been planning on as an expansion. We've removed that from the project. We no longer need that expansion to provide sufficient parking. So we'll end up with a site plan that just looks like that. No changes to the existing employee parking area in our project. So I did mention that we're no longer requesting the waiver for the native plant species. That's because we were able to, first of all, the arborvitae that we had isn't native, but we were able to find an equivalent arborvitae species that is native. And then we made a replacement for forsythia. And I could get into that if the board has any questions, but we no longer need that waiver. We do need the waiver for the dead-end aisle That's due to section 6.1.8.c. I won't go through all of it unless the board would like me to, but I believe that the planner provided some comments on that in some of her preparations for the meeting tonight. We did apply for a variance with the Zoning Board of Appeals that had to do with the accessory building requirements and height and front building line. We attended their February 23rd meeting, and they approved the variance. And that is it for my presentation.
All right, very good. Mr. Hardeman, do you have anything to add?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We'll start with Mr. Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is, are you still in the appeal period for the variance?
We are for the ZBA
Yes.
variance approval, yes. That will be concluded on the 20th, March 20th.
Okay. All right. Being the fact that everybody else has signed off on your proposal, I guess I have to too, not have to, but I want to comment on something. And I conversed with Alex, she didn't agree with me today, but she didn't argue the point either. So many times we have projects in town that aren't completed to code, to the bylaws. And I could name them, but I'm not going to, because we had not a building inspector, we had a town manager, not the present one, who wanted to keep all the dollars in his pocket. Sometimes you need a peer review, and I understand that you didn't desire to have a peer review because you do the reviews for the things that are coming into the town. So I guess you feel that you have the power to do it correctly for yourself, too. I kind of disagree with that, but if that's the philosophy, that's what we'll live by on this project. All right, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have many questions at all. I just, I'm aware of the dead-end aisle thing there, and the justification of not putting another entrance on Pine Street makes all the sense in the world, you know? And for the longest time on the board, Kevin, you've been working as a town engineer since I recall. So I have the utmost trust in the fact that you'll do the right thing for this project. Now you're the DPW director, and you probably would have done it as a town engineer as well. So with that being said, I know, I can only assume that you won't cut corners and you make this project the best you possibly can. It'll be in your best interest as the DPW director as well. So, so with that said, we'll be on the lookout as well as the planning board, as we always do, you know, answering questions and comments from the public. So we'll be there looking at what's going on and all that. So with that, I have no more questions and comments, and I just wish you guys good luck.
Mr. Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Kevin, so there were two issues. There was the height issue on the accessory building. Is that the one that we just recently got a ZBA approval?
That's one of two issues with the ZBA, yes.
And the other one is the front yard setback, and that one is pending?
Well, they were both approved,
Okay,
and they're now in the 20-day.
understood, okay. Okay, well, that's great news. I also don't have a problem with the waiver, and is it also a land disturbance that we're looking for?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
As we talked about the driveway and the dead end, I like it a lot better this way with the three-point turn for the fire apparatus. In echoing Mr. Fowler's comments and Mr. Vitale's comments, I also have the utmost confidence that as our town engineer, that this project will be designed and monitored to the utmost standards. You know, we represent the 31,000 plus citizens for the town of Tewksbury, and you're acting on their behalf. And so I would just ask that, you know, at a minimum, I always feel on the town side, we should hold ourselves to the highest standard we've ever held anybody else in the town. And as this project moves forward, I would just like to have you keep that in your mind as we manage. And I know when it comes to the elementary school building committee, you know, I fought for every dollar as if it was coming out of my own pocket, because in a way, it was. And so I'd appreciate that kind of mentality going into this project, that you're acting on behalf of 31,000 residents, and they're counting on you to deliver a great building and keep our DPW staff happy, which will keep our roads nice and clear when we have nor'easters bearing down on us, and so on. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Interesting timing that you have, you know, with the storm coming up and us deciding on the DPW building. I don't know if you worked on that, but that's fine. No, I have no issue with this. My one question was on the area that you're not gonna have to pave now. What are you doing with that for now? Are you reserving it for future potential, or are you just gonna
No.
landscape it and
It's already vegetated, you
just
know,
leave
these
it
trees.
as is?
We're gonna leave it untouched.
Okay, all right. Well, otherwise, the questions we had from our previous meeting are addressed, or people are satisfied at least, so that works for me. With that, I will open it up to the audience. Anyone in the audience with any questions, comments, or concerns at this time? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board at this time?
Motion to close the public hearing?
All right, I have a motion to close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimous. First for the waiver. The waiver is to section 6.1.8.c. And as was noted earlier, the town planner has suggested some conditions. You're aware of the conditions
Yes.
and no issues, so we will incorporate conditions 1, 2, and 3, which are listed here for us. I'm going to read these out, right? No, okay, all right. So those will be incorporated into the motion for the waiver. Do I have a motion on the waiver?
Make a motion to approve the waivers as listed, Mr. Chairman.
And incorporating the conditions. We have a motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. As to the site, yeah, want to do that order? Okay, we'll do land disturbance permit first. We have a motion on the land disturbance permit.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the land disturbance permit.
All right, so do I have a second?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, motion carries. Now, as to the site plan review, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve the site plan review at 999 Whipple Road, as well as the land disturbance permit that we talked about earlier.
All right, we just did the land disturbance permits.
Yeah.
We'll just do the site
Just, as-
plan.
yeah, Whipple.
With the incorporating the changes on the plan submitted this evening. All right, so I have a motion made. Do I have a second?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those
Aye.
opposed, motion carries. All right, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
All right. Long time coming, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to agenda item D, 1 Main Street, site plan review. I have a motion to waive the public reading.
So moved.
A motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. We have here. Gentlemen, once you get settled, just give your names for the record. The floor will be yours.
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is David Plunkett. I'm representing the applicant here tonight. Just for clarity, as set forth in the application before you, the owner of the parcel, the locust parcel is 1 Main Street, which is the site of the Simon Car Center that's owned by C&M LLC. We have in the package the letter of authorization for me to act as representative here tonight, and also the letter from the C&M LLC appointing HMD Enterprises LLC as its authorized agent relative to this process. In the audience tonight with us are members of HMD Enterprises LLC, officers of the entity that are here in the event that there's any further questions that might come up beyond the application or beyond the presentation that will be presented to the board tonight. At the table with me tonight is Jessie Moberg from Cavney Architecture. She will go over the building itself in terms of the intended improvements to the structure as it exists. Ken Cram will give a overview of his traffic analysis with the understanding that the town has requested a peer review report on that. So with that in mind, Ken will adapt his presentation accordingly. And also Matt Hammer from Landplex LLC, who go over the site plan for presentation before the board. You know, as indicated, Mr. Chairman, this is the one Main Street parcel with the current use as a auto service sales location. The proposal that we're coming before the board tonight is to change the use, that this would be under the revised bylaws, which allows as a use of right in the district a marijuana distributory location. The site is not going to be changed relative to the fact that the building, the footprint of the building will remain unchanged. The site, there's not going to be any further pavement or anything else, that as it exists, we're going to utilize the existing layout of the parcel of land as it is today. The major improvements will be to the upgrades to the building itself and changing the layout of the area around the building with specific parking to meet all the requirements and exceed the requirements of the town relative to parking obligations. And you're also removing certain things such as an existing propane tank that's currently utilized by the operation that's in existence today. At this point, what I'd like to do, if we could, if there's no initial questions, is start with Jessie to go over what the intended improvements to the building that are going to be relative to the exterior and the interior flow of the building.
I'm gonna grab that mobile mic. Yeah.
Can I just talk real loud, or?
No, it needs to get picked up for the record.
That way it gets picked up for at home, if anybody's watching, and for recording purposes.
So my name is Jessie Moberg. I'm the architect for the project. I've also designed their other two locations in Haverhill and Lowell. Very similar design. The only thing about this one is it's much, much smaller. So I believe you have all the images that were going to show up on these same boards in your packet. There's no difference between this and what's in front of you. So this is just a rendering of the aesthetic for the building. We're using the same footprint, changing up the parapet a little bit. We would like to keep the stone on the base and just clean up the building, make it look nice and freshly painted. The parapet has some hardy trim on it with the logo. The signage is the same as what we have at the other locations, and this is reflective of what the design of their same building is in Haverhill. On the interior, we're carrying very similar finishes to their other locations as well. It's a sort of modern farmhouse vibe to it. Oh, there goes my.
Nice grab.
We have an adjustment issue here. Okay, so a little bit of a modern farmhouse look, a lot of stone, natural wood, and trying to just keep the finishes consistent with their branding. For the floor plan itself and the overall flow of the building, we are not changing the footprint at all. That makes this facility quite small. It's just over 1,500, 1,600 square feet total. We have the public area, the retail area is about 880 square feet, and the remainder is designated for back-of-house use only, that's staff only, restricted by card readers and security devices. Main entry and exit stays where it currently is for the auto service. You walk into a vestibule with enough space for people who are waiting to get in or queuing. We don't expect that to be an issue here, but we do have some space reserved for it. There's a reception desk for an ID check. We do have head of security here if you have specific questions about how that works, but essentially every person coming in is going to have their ID checked at both reception and at the point of sale. Once the reception check is in, you get buzzed into the sales floor. We have a small display area. Again, it's 800 square feet. There's not really anywhere for people to go. We have 4 points of sale, so 4 individual registers, at least one designated for ADA compliance, so a lower countertop. We have a back bar behind where they can keep product for quick access during sales. It's also an opportunity to have display screens with menus, as well as people walking on the floor if necessary to help customers make their choices. Back of house is accessed behind the point of sale, so it's secure off the floor. Back of house operations are very basic. We have a break room for employees, a handful of offices, toilet for staff only, a little bit of general storage, and then we have secure storage and the security server room, which is required by CCC regulations. Off the back of the building here, there is an existing retaining wall. It's a low retaining wall made out of block that is sort of cordoning off this area. There's a car lift out there currently that they use when it's nice outside. They put the car up and do whatever undercarriage maintenance is required. We are proposing to enclose that area with a decorative, probably vinyl or chain link with privacy slat fence, and that'll be used for secure receiving of product. So there's no product visible coming or going from the building. It's all happening in this secure area. Because the footprint is so small, we do have a couple of sort of out-of-the-box Home Depot parking lot sheds for general storage, paper goods, toilet paper, receipt paper, things along those lines. And that's really it for the changes to the building. We'll be looking at what we need to do, if anything, to bring the building envelope up to code. The facility will have all new MEP systems, also up to code. The square footage and use does not require sprinklers, so we will not be adding them. Otherwise, it's just kind of making the building a little bit prettier than it is, and making the flow work for the intended use.
All right, thank
All
you.
right? Oh, yeah, forgot about that one. We have also done a photometric of the site. Our site boundary here is showing we have adequate light levels for the new parking and for the safety of staff throughout the parking lot, but also indicating that any proposed new lighting is not going beyond our boundary lines. You can see the fixtures here are dark sky fixtures intended to keep any additional light coming onto the site within our property. I will just note, not accounted on here is the ambient light from Main Street itself, from the highway, and from the abutters. All right?
Thank you.
All set?
Mr. Plunkett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to go on with the presentation, I'll just ask Ken to give a brief synopsis of his initial traffic report, which, again, has been submitted to the town, so you should have that as part of your package as we wait for a peer review.
Good evening, Ken Cram from Bayside Engineering. Glad to be back. Yes, as Mr. Plunkett indicated, we did do a full traffic impact and access study, and here's the complete version with all the appendices, rather voluminous. But we went out and we followed Mass DOT's guidelines. We got new traffic counts. We looked at basically 2 intersections, our site driveway and Main Street and Clark, those being the key intersections in the vicinity of the site. We did counts in January. We seasonally adjusted them upward because January is typically a lower month. And based on available Mass DOT volumes, we used a 1.15 factor, so that's roughly 15% higher. And there's no question there's a fair amount of volume on Main Street. We kind of, with the adjustments, almost 24,500 cars a day. And then on Saturday, it's about the same volume going into and out of Lowell, or anyone heading towards 495. We did a crash assessment Both intersections, I went back to 2017 because 2 of those years in between were COVID years, and crashes are typically lower, but not necessarily all the time. But in this case here, in those years, there were only 7 crashes when there were a total of 33 over the 6-year period. So traffic volumes are coming back slowly. They're not 100% back yet because a lot of offices are still allowing employees to work from home. And in particular, one big agency in the state, Mass DOT, is still on a hybrid work schedule. And it's kind of frustrating sometimes trying to deal with them because you can't get them. The area, we're served by public transportation. We got the LRTA, so that's good for possible customers and employees. But the big thing is there's planned roadway improvements. We don't always get that opportunity to say that. Usually we're the ones doing the improvements, but Mass DOT has a project for the 7, 8 signals that go from just across the line at Phoenix with Rogers Street, through us at Clark, through the 495 interchange, down past Walmart, all the way down to Assel and Pike Street. All those signals are going to be upgraded with a new entirely signal system that's going to be more reactive to existing traffic conditions during peak flow times. That's supposed to start spring's a week away. Yeah, right. It's supposed to start then. So that's our existing conditions. Our future conditions, we use the 1% growth rate, CTPS, we use their model. They have a 0.92% growth rate, we used 1. And then we talked with the City of Lowell and Tewksbury, and at the time, no other projects were identified that we needed to include in our background projections. We're looking at future trip generation. We use the ITE trip generation manual, Land Use Code 882, which is marijuana dispensary. But recognizing we're not going to generate any traffic during the morning peak hour because we're not going to be open during the morning peak hour. We're going to have, we're planning to request to be open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday, and 12 noon to 6 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. But we're going to generate 32 trips, cut that in half for the number of cars in and out, 16 during the evening peak hour, and up to 50 trips on Saturday. We're not talking big numbers, and also the existing facility, that generates a very small amount of traffic right now, relatively speaking, and that will be coming off, and we'll add on our traffic. And of course, we did our usual capacity analysis. Traffic engineers, they rate intersections, A being good, F being bad, for both signalized and unsignalized. And all of our intersections for the driveway, with our proposed mitigation, will operate level service D or better. And then in the future conditions, the intersection under future build conditions will be level service C or better at the signalized intersection. Now, I said, what mitigation? Well, what we have is a driveway that is close, but not too close to the intersection of Clark Road, but there's 3 lanes of traffic, and I'll call it in the eastbound or the southbound direction heading into Tewksbury from Lowell. We took a look at that. The volume of traffic that wants to turn left is not significant necessarily, but you're still going to cross 3 lanes of traffic, and there's those 3 lanes during peak hours, they're queued up. Not that far, but enough to go past our driveway. So we don't want to create the condition where we're going to have someone who's trying to make a left, and the first car lets him go through, but the second car doesn't see him trying to make that left, and he comes barreling down the road, and you end up with what we call your courtesy crash. So we've made the recommendation, and the applicants are agreeable to it, to prohibit left turns out of the site. That's what we'll be taking forward. We will need to talk to Mass DOT, and that's what we will be proposing to Mass DOT. So, and as I said, as Mr. Plunkett said earlier, this will be peer reviewed, and so we will be looking forward to working with the peer reviewer on addressing any comments that they may raise. And I left the circulation up to Matt on site.
With that, Mr. Chairman, Matt Hammer from Landplex will review the actual site layout and, the traffic flow around the building.
Matt Hammer, Landplex Engineering, Lowell, Mass. The subject property is 21,521 square feet, which is here. Existing is an existing one-story service station here, and also a repair area in the rear with a concrete slab. There's an existing curb cut here. There's an existing curb cut here, and there's also an existing curb cut here, but that's off-site. There's also a right-of-way that comes in here and extends into the rear of the adjoining property. We are proposing essentially to do line striping in order to demarcate the parking where it's not demarcated now. So coming in, there'll be 7 spaces here, and the spaces will not encroach onto this right-of-way here. There's going to be 6 spaces in front of the building with 2 newly formed handicap accessibility spaces. There's going to be a cross-hatched area here, and that'll be for snow storage. On this right-hand side, it's area that's not currently being used, and we're going to provide a proposed sign that says that that area is for snow storage. There's also going to be a sign here, which is going to say one way, where the vehicles will be going one way when they go around the building in this direction. Within this center area here, they'll be able to go both ways. And the one way will also extend around the building in one way, leaving the site with arrows identifying that. There'll also be a loading and unloading area here. I know one of the comments said that it was preferred not to be an 8-foot fence, and we can make that fence 7 feet to comply with the regulations there. And this will be the area where a van will be coming into the facility to unload materials for the site itself, and that'll also be fenced. There's going to be 6 spaces in the rear. There'll be a newly located dumpster area. Right now, the dumpster area encroaches off of the property in the rear. So there'll be a new dumpster area here, and that will also be fenced with a solid vinyl fence, and that'll be 6 feet in height. One of the recommendations through the IDR meeting was that this space here was felt that it was not clearly accessible, but we'll cross-hatch that so that it's not identified as a parking space. Additionally, along the edge here, there'll be 3 more parallel spaces. We're also putting a sign here to identify that you could do snow storage. We'll be doing snow storage along this area here, along the edge of the parking area. There's also going to be a sign here that says "Do not enter" this area here, so that vehicles are identified by signage. To not only have a sign here that'll say "No right turn" here, but also "Do not enter," so that vehicles are not going in the opposite direction from the one-way drive. The existing propane tank that's in the rear is going to be removed. And We're going to line stripe this area over in here, and we're going to be having a bicycle staging area next to the building, which will be located here. And is proposed to have 3 bike racks. There'll be a small landscaped area in front of the building here, and we're going to form a sidewalk so that it's more pronouncedly identified with a walkway to come into the building. I can leave it up to the board for any comments.
All right. Mr. Plunkett, anything else from the panel?
That's it, Mr. Chairman, just asking the board to, look at the site relative to what surrounds it, that this is very appropriate for this type of retail use. The bylaws recognize this as a permitted use of right once they get a permit from the select board. And certainly, this is not something that would be would be very much in line with the type of establishments that are around it. You have highway, you have car dealerships, you have, retail, strip malls and everything else. That it's a situation, this certainly would blend with the area, would be very appropriate for this area. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that you or the board may have.
All right, so I've done this before we've started each of the hearings on this use, so I'll remind everyone in case it's their first time here. We are not here to relitigate whether or not this use is appropriate for the site. That's been determined. The town voted, this is a by right use, so that means it is appropriate for where it is. The wisdom of whether or not it should or shouldn't be there is a different question, but that's the second part of what I'm going to say we are not here to discuss. That is to be discussed at the Board of Selectmen, okay? We're here to discuss the site plan. So we're gonna look at, if you have an issue with traffic, if you have an issue with the way the building's being designed, something like that, that is appropriate for here, we will discuss that. If you go off on these other topics, I'm gonna stop you because it's not appropriate for us to be discussing whether or not it should be there, okay? I've said that for all the other hearings. That also includes the fact that there may be one nearby. So any feelings you may have as to, again, the wisdom of whether it makes sense, not for us to discuss here. That is for the Board of the Select Board to deal with, should this get to them. All right? Everybody's on the same page? All right, we'll bring it to the board now. I'll start with Mr. Fattalia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. I know we won't get through this all tonight, but I will have a couple. So is there a lease agreement in place for this property, or is there the purchase agreement?
There's an agreement between HMD Enterprises LLC and C&M LLC. C&M LLC is the owner. HMD Enterprises LLC is their duly authorized agent here tonight. HMD Enterprises LLC would be the entity that would be moving forward with the operation, provided we get the site plan approval and the license from the select board.
Okay. So is it a lease agreement, or are they going to be owner occupied in the building? So,
I'm not sure what the nature of their interest would be.
Hi, my name is Janet Kupris.
You have to go up to the podium.
My name is Janet Kupris. I'm the CEO of Full Harvest Moons, which is owned entirely by HMD Enterprises. We do have a long-term lease agreement with option purchase at the end.
purchase, great. So the reason why I asked that question, that's fine. So, Mr. Plunkett, is, I guess, when we decide on who is going to be there, or who's going to get the license, I'd like to have it so that somebody is not going to just have a one-year lease and then they go. Now we have a situation where now we have an outstanding retail marijuana establishment with no place to go. So that was my only question, and that's minor, in fact. So now that we have that in place, that's great. So a couple other questions I have is, I know you have a 15,000 square foot property, building to use. Does that seem rather small because we've been getting, some of them come in with over 2,000, 2,700 square foot. Can you do all you need to do in that square footage?
You can, yes. You have
Can you just,
to,
if you don't mind, if you just pull the
sorry.
microphone closer. Thank you.
Yes, so the building itself is a little under 1,700 square feet. It is not the smallest that I've designed and have it work functionally.
Okay.
I've done as little as about 900 square feet and still have it up and running with all the proper staff areas and enough room for customer flow. The sales floor in this one is actually a little bit larger than the original design for it. We were able to shrink down some of the back of house spaces, just tighten things up. It's more difficult operationally to design for it, but once you design for it, it's pretty efficient.
Okay, great. So I would like to have some questions about the traffic. So my opinion, it's one of the busiest spots that we have with potential sites coming in for marijuana retail. And with that being said, I guess, how many cars do you project coming in and out on a daily basis? I know you had peak hours, and I know I've read some other ones about peak hours as well, but, I mean, total cars coming in?
370 trips on a weekday, cut that in half for the total number of cars, so that's what, 185? And then 454 on a Saturday, or 227 in and out.
Coming in,
Hours of a day.
and going up?
Right.
Okay. So I like the idea of when you come out of the site, you have to go right only, because God only knows how someone's either gonna go left at all because of that busiest intersection I think that we have regarding this. Another question I had was the fire department. Are they gonna go around the building as far as turning around, or are they going in and?
So I believe everyone should have a copy of this.
Yeah.
And this is showing how the fire truck goes around the building and exits.
Around the entire building, right? Okay. All right, good. All right, I'm all set for now, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
All right, Mr. Duffy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The right turn only that you're gonna take out of there, which makes a lot of sense, and I look forward to the peer review on the traffic analysis. Correct me if I'm wrong, but does that put you into the exit-only lane to 495 south there, or?
No, it puts you right into the through lane, because the ramp is then beyond the signal, and then you can diverge off and get into 495 southbound, or
okay.
go straight.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The propane tank removal, is that an above-ground propane tank currently? Are there any underground components to that, or is there any other further remediation that's gonna be required to remove that propane tank from the site?
I don't know what's going to be required on that, but if we can look into that a little further. Are you wondering if there's a underground line that goes from here over to the building?
Just if there's any further remediation involved with the propane tank removal, like.
Yeah, it'll be up
like
to the-
any, you know, if there's been any leakage or, you know, anything like that over the years.
Well, it'll be monitored by the fire prevention section of the fire department for the removal of that and the
Sure.
closure of the tank, so
Okay.
I'm sure we'll rely on them for that.
And then I just had one other question. I'm looking at the bike racks, and it looks like they're kind of like on the sidewalk, if I'm not mistaken there.
That's correct.
So are the bikes gonna be kind of like nose into that? Is it a bike rack, or is it gonna block the pathway on the sidewalk there, or?
It's not meant to be a pedestrian path per se, this section here. It was just meant to be a bike staging area.
Okay, so basically, if somebody comes out the front door and they're parked out back, they have to kind of walk, if there's bicycles parked in that staging area, they have to kind of walk around the bicycles and,
Correct.
like, kind of out into the parking area there.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I just wonder if there might be a better location for that bike rack.
Yeah, we
Like,
could take a look at maybe,
back right-hand corner kind of comes to mind a little bit to me, yeah,
like back in here.
yeah.
Yeah, we could do that.
Just a thought,
Sure,
you know, for safety concern, you know?
yeah.
And I think that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple of things. Did I hear you right? There's going to be some Home Depot sheds located on the lot somewhere?
Probably better phrasing for that, but just an out-of-the-box sort of
Reed's
build-on-site
Ferry,
shed.
okay, it's a quality establishment, sure.
It's not a permanent structure, is what we're getting at there. It's the kind of shed that you would buy and put on your back deck to store pool toys or something like that. It's just enough for weather protection and not a permanent structure.
So things on paper don't always look the same as they are out in real life. And I'm trying to imagine, looking at the auto turn fire truck, it's 34 feet wide, even with that extra curbing where the no left turn sign will be. And so I was just looking as far as your various parking areas, trying to determine where you might be putting those sheds. And if it was going to take away from any of the spaces or impact any of the
No,
traffic.
they're in the receiving area, sorry.
They're in the so they're
So if you-
inside the receiving area
Yeah,
where
if
the
you look
lift
at the
is right now.
back, there's these two rectangles at
Okay.
the back of there. They're not visible from the public side. You'd have to be in that secure receiving area to get to them.
So basically, again, on paper, I'm a little concerned with the flow of traffic just in the front of the building where you have the two-way part. Just people coming off of 38, they might be coming in kind of hot. And if you have somebody that's coming back out or somebody that's looping around or somebody that's backing out, you know, it just, I don't know if it's what the solution would be necessarily, maybe taking away a space to increase some visibility or something like that. I don't know if the traffic study review might pick up on something like that. On the weekend, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name off the top of my head, but it's 454 cars, but that's in a 6-hour window from 12 to 6, right?
Correct.
So that's in and out, so technically it's half of that, but it's still a car about every 90 seconds entering the site on a Saturday.
Yes, if my math is correct.
So that's a pretty good clip. That's a lot of people zipping in, zipping out, and I know it's about a 5-minute window based on information we've gotten from other presentations to go in and pick up the merchandise and leave. But with that much flow in and out, now you might have some backups because you can't just get out on a 38 like you can pulling out of your own driveway. So I was just concerned a little bit about the two-way flow of traffic in the front of the building and how that might impact people coming in from 38 if someone were to turn a little bit wide or if somebody didn't park, you know, perfectly in their lane.
Well, yeah, the way the site's designed, you have two choices when you first come in. You can either, and they won't be coming in high, because the volume of traffic that's right there is, you're already most likely slowing down because you're in between two traffic signals that, you know, that's going to help to monitor the flow, kind of like traffic calming. Granted, this is a long corridor where the Mass DOT improvements are going to be. But you also have the opportunity to go straight into the rear of the site and circulate around the building, depending, because when you come in, if you look to the left and you see, you know, of the dozen or so parking spaces, there's none there, you're gonna circulate, and you know there's parking in the back, you're gonna go to the back. So, I don't see it as an issue, one car every minute and a half coming in or out. I was trying to find the queue calculations, and there's just so many, I just couldn't put my fingers on it really fast. But I don't think that there will be a problem with the volume of traffic that we're projecting, particularly with when there's 15 trips right now during the midday peak hour from the Simon's facility, and we're going to go to 50, so we're adding 35. So I don't see that additional 17 or 18 cars over the course of an hour as being significant.
Okay. I have no further comments, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fowle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you, Mr. Cram, for answering 2 of my 4 questions already. Thank you, Jonathan. The part-time, the area that is a right-of-way on the far left side of the building from Route 38, which is the southerly side, is there a curb cut in the road now?
Yes, there is. the curb cut is located here,
Yeah.
just away from it. Which is located right here.
Okay. My question is that going to be filled in with curbing? So that no one comes in there?
That's the intention, yes, is to
It
have
is.
that, yeah,
It is.
to have that curb cut closed off here, but not to restrict, you know, if they want to have a curb cut directly in front of that right-of-way and go through Mass Highway to do that, they could do that to
Right,
access that.
Right. On that same site, being the fact that there were no cars parked there, correct?
That's correct.
There were no cars parked on that right-of-way area?
We're not proposing to have cars parked on the
Okay. Are you
right-of-way.
going to vegetate it?
Could we?
Yes.
I don't think we can restrict that right-of-way.
Why?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Fowler, just the intent of not utilizing that area shown as a right-of-way is to reflect the location of the area that was shown on the initial 1967 plan that created the parcel as it exists today. So it hasn't been used.
Right.
But it's there on the plan, so our approach would be to take the most appropriate way to assure that there's no issue relative to the parcel adjacent is to not utilize it at all.
Right.
So that's what the intent is. It's just, reflected there. No one has used it since 1967 when the plan was created, but we don't want to assert any rights to create an issue relative to it. So that's why it's just left as blank and not even utilizing it for parking.
Even vegetation?
We wouldn't want to have to agree that we have to dedicate that to vegetation in the event that something happened and someone said, hey, that's our right of way, you don't have a right to, you're interfering with our right of way. Our best effort, our best, solution is to just don't use it. Don't incorporate it into any utilization for the site itself, including, putting plantings in there.
I think you and I both know, Mr. Plunkett, that over the years, 2 or 3 people have tried to
Oh, yeah,
put something in there,
yeah,
and it's impossible because you're on the wrong side of the lights.
yeah.
And, so now what are you gonna have, someone has to maintain that?
Yeah.
I mean, grass or something.
Well, it would be maintained as it is today, which is, today it's paved.
Correct.
Yeah, so today it's paved, and that we would continue to maintain it as a paved area.
Okay, thank you. My next question is to Ken. The Clark Road lights, where the cars are coming out of Clark Road, going left and right, do you foresee a problem, not when there's 3 lanes of cars across the street from it, but when there are no cars there on Route 38 going south? Could there be headlight wash onto the cars coming out of Clark Road that could obstruct them?
If you have we did put the copy of the proposed plan in the appendix. And if you're coming off of Clark Road, it's going to shine, the lights there are going to shine not to the curb cut that Matt just described, but the third one closest to 495.
Right.
It's going to shine into that general area.
Okay.
And Mass DOT, as part of their plans, is proposing to close that curb cut.
Okay. Let's reverse that. would the headlight wash from people parked in the parking lot affect people coming out of there, out of Clark Road?
No, I don't think so, because looking at Matt's plan, with the right-of-way is,
Right.
there's a fair amount of distance between the right turn lane coming off of Clark, if you go straight across.
Right.
Where he just drew the line.
Yep,
It's shining almost just to the right of the proposed, that right-of-way.
okay. Because as you probably remember, at Burger King, we had them put in a evergreens and a fence in the area where they had the drive-up window. And because it was affecting the people on Route 38. But we'll have to watch this and see what happens. Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fowler. So, mine not gonna be too long. As far as the building, I have no issue with the way you designed it. I mean, it's an improvement over with the way the building looks now. So from that perspective, I don't really have any issues with the design. As far as the pulling into the site, you know, I understand Mr. Champion's concern. I'm not sure with the way that turn is, how hot you could come in. Especially if as many cars are kind of coming in and out, more than likely there's somebody there waiting to come out onto the road, so it doesn't give you that option of kind of whipping in there and using the other lane to do so. But as far as the flow, is there any negative to you to just simply making it one way coming in and have them come around, park, and leave? That eliminates the likelihood of, say, a poor driver who's leaving, doesn't leave enough space for someone who's coming in to make that left to come into the parking area. Now you got that queue up of potentially a couple of cars right onto 38. Whereas if you come in and just take the one way around, like a drive-through basically, you know, the long way around, then you come around, park, back out, leave, and when you're backing out, you're not expecting or worried about people coming at you from potentially both directions. You're only gonna back out and leave. And, you know, flow-wise, it might save the possibility of an issue. I'm not saying you know, that the issues will happen, but, you know, it is close to 38. You know, you're coming in and you need to make that left pretty quick to get into the main parking area. You know, I just don't know, maybe it might make some sense to just bring people in, let them traverse around the building, come around the front, park, and make things a little simpler for those folks out who are leaving when they're done, to not have the two-way traffic potential to deal with.
We can certainly, that's something that, a thought that hasn't been explored, and we will certainly review it for the next meeting.
And in terms of the right turn only, what is your thoughts on how you'd have that? Is that just a sign? Is that the big giant yellow right arrow on the ground too? You know, not that it's, you know, again, it's not that it makes everybody do what they're supposed to do, but
Yeah, so we'll make sure we discuss with the traffic engineer the there is a sign here, we're saying no left-hand turn, but we'll make sure we provide the proper sign.
I mean, I think in this case, because of how important it's gonna be not to be coming out and having people go left, you're probably looking at, you know, needing the yellow arrow on the ground.
So you're talking on
the
striping on the
yeah.
ground. Yeah.
And just, you know, right there, you know, showing that you should only be going out right. Again, you can't guarantee everybody does what they're supposed to do, but when that person gets courtesy crashed coming across the road, they're not gonna have much to complain about when, you know, they've had every indication that they shouldn't have done it to begin with.
Correct.
So, you know, otherwise, the only other, you have that section of snow storage to the right, and you said there's a little bit on the left. It's a decent size, you know, parking area. You have enough room to keep the snow dealt with on site, and you just presume anything over, you know, regular snow, you just have taken off?
Yeah, so we felt as though this is a sizable area for snow. There's also a little bit of area along these areas here that are additional. And then we have this side here. This area of the property is, it's not our property, but we feel as though there's ample area around the parking area that's not going to intrude into current businesses right now. Not that that's a legitimate answer, but we feel as though
I'm gonna pretend you didn't say that part.
but we feel as though with the strip here, the area here, this area here, an additional area here, that we do have enough snow storage.
I mean, my concern, obviously, you're showing more than enough parking, but that disappears quickly when someone decides to make the executive decision that we're just gonna plow over parking spaces because we can. So I'm basically saying now, don't. So, because I mean, we want that parking available for people. If you're really gonna have that kind of, business coming in and out, they need the places to park, you can't be having them covered in snow. So it's, use the snow area, and after that, it's gotta come off-site. All right, that's it for me for now. Mr. Fratelli?
Yeah, I have a question. Somebody drives into the facility, right? Expects to park out front, all right? Drives in, goes left, doesn't have a spot. How do you get out of there?
So they come in as it's
Design,
proposed.
Go left.
So go left.
all the way to the end, there's no parking spots.
There's
That's a
certainly-
one-way area of not going right
Right.
around the building.
There's certainly adequate area for them to do a turn and then come back out
So
and
this-
take a left around the building.
Well, this area here is not going to be utilized. So
Okay.
they could go in there, turn themselves back around. Because
So pull in.
this whole area will be cleared of any cars.
Okay. That may be a hazard for somebody that doesn't drive too well. Having to make a U-turn to get back into that traffic area. And then they have to go out and go around the building to try to find a parking spot, right? Okay. It just seems concerning to me that you can't figure a better way to do that rather than have to rely on someone to make a U-turn in that area to get back into somewhere to buy a product. Would it be better for them to go around the building and park? And
It might be. Yep.
any thoughts of making two ways in and out? Two means of egress, two driveways, one in and one out? Making another curb cut?
So our thought process was, we do have two curb cuts. We were going to remove the curb cut that was closest to the light, and then improving the current situation that's there now and utilizing the curb cut that's furthest away from the light.
Okay. It will prevent any backup as you come into the driveway. So someone could just have to go in that way, and they have to go around the building if there's no spot there, and then they have to exit the other way. But
Right.
just an idea. So I'll set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
So I think Mr. Fratelli's point just, highlights mine of saying that it might be better to just make this one way. I would not advocate a second curb cut use, only because you have the same issue that we have down, further down on 38, where, despite all the signage and whatnot at Al Fresca's, people seem unable to understand that one is in and one is out more often than you'd like. And that's not quite as bad as it would be on this part of 38 to have somebody making that mistake as they're coming across multi-lanes and whatnot. So I think the one place in and out is just safer for everyone. And to solve Mr. Fratelli's concern and mine, I think the one way around might be the best solve to make, so you're not doing the U-turn that Mr. Fratelli brought up, and you're not running the risk of a queue up on people coming in, which was my concern. So I think, the one way around won't be the worst setup. All right?
Mr. Chairman, I just had one more question, because Mr. Fratelli illustrated a point. Because if you come in and you come across the front of the building where it's two-way, but now there's nothing in that corner where the right-of-way is, you can do a three-point turn, but, and this, I guess, Alex, maybe you can answer this for me. Have they not created sort of a de facto dead-end driveway there?
I thought about that as well, Mr. Champa, but because technically the driveway doesn't block off, I don't think it qualifies. Functionally, yes, I guess it could be, but, literally speaking, no. But I do think that, if Mr. Chairman will allow me, I think a lot of the concerns could probably be addressed through the peer review that, was discussed. So if that's something that the board would like to move forward with, I can engage a third-party reviewer tomorrow to start looking
So
at
we're gonna
these.
do that, we're doing that, so let's add that to the check that we've asked, that might be a consideration for the best flow. At this point, you've now had 3 members bring it up,
I'd
so.
like to add something. One of the reasons why you have a 24-foot wide aisle is because you can do a 3-point turn in a 24-foot aisle. So,
Yeah, I mean, you can, but
Yeah.
obviously, there are at least some concerns, so, I mean, unless you have some business reason or some other reason that you say, one way around makes no sense to us, that's fine. You know what I mean? If you do, that's fine. It just feels like as a cleanup, I mean, you have that wide aisle, but that doesn't really alleviate my concern, which is if someone's coming in and someone's coming out that's not making sure they stick to their side, they're in the way of the person who wants to go left to go into the parking lot. They're gonna have to wait until that person moves, in which case they're stopped in the middle of the aisle with maybe room for one more car behind them that's coming within the next 90 seconds if the numbers are right, or less. So, like I said, you can make your argument any way you want, that's fine.
No,
I'm just suggesting it might work.
yep, no,
Mr. Chairman, if I could add one more.
Let me just, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mike.
no, that makes sense. We were just trying to maximize all the parking available on the site. The parking requirement is fulfilled in that center area. You commonly have parking areas where they do dead end. That's the reason for the 24-foot aisle. But it's a good suggestion, and we'll take it into consideration to reconfigure that if need be. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't believe that will be an actual problem in the parking area to turn yourself back around, but it is an inconvenience, absolutely, and we'll take a look at reconfiguring that.
Well, let me just, I know what the parking, so just because we've decided to do this, so now I'm gonna ask. So you ran your numbers, right? So it's Saturday, right? About how many cars are gonna be coming in, say in, to run your numbers that, in a 15-minute period, because we know it's gonna take about 5 minutes for them in the store, right? So how many cars are gonna be coming in? There's gonna be more than 8? Or how many spaces do we have here in the front? 14. 14. Is it possible there's gonna be more than 14 cars in that time frame?
No, not based on my experience, because the spaces turn over really fast. It's, this use,
Wait,
ever
so,
since.
I'm sorry, I don't want to stop you. You're saying, so there's gonna be the cars will be moving around even more often in that area, is what you're saying? Because you're saying they're gonna turn over quickly.
Right, every 10, 15 minutes max.
So cars moving in and out of that area often?
Correct.
So I just spoke to the owner, or to the person who's going to be leasing, the applicant, and he has no problem having that go one way around. I just didn't want to answer without speaking to him first.
Okay. In that case, we'll.
I just feel like that there's a little bit of an unknown here, where we don't have the retail establishments, any of them in town yet. And I think that there's a certain unknown as far as the traffic patterns and so on and so forth. And I think, I know I would feel more comfortable with the peer reviews in these instances because it's kind of a, quote-unquote new business in town. And I think that the residents and the board, maybe some of the board members might feel a little bit better as well, as if we clearly address, because we just don't know. You know what I mean? It's not like we could say, well, it's like Dunkin' Donuts, it's like Al Fresco's or whatever. So I think if you would, clearly, clearly put out what your thoughts are, and let's look at a peer review on the traffic patterns, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay, so with that, we'll open up the audience, reminding everyone of what I said before. So if anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to come up to the podium. Go-
Sure.
All right, so seeing no one rise, once, twice, bring it back to the board. What is the pleasure of the board at this time?
Like a motion, make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to continue the hearing until,
7:10 on the 27th. You guys, you're fine with that?
No,
Oh, you're not, okay.
no, because we haven't seen the peer review yet. I won't have time to respond. most of
okay?
it.
The following meeting?
Function of peer review.
Well, I'll just say this, I mean, yes, you may not yet be done with the traffic, but if you think you have other things that you want to discuss, you could come back on the 27th, but it's completely up to you. If you want to do it all in one stop, then you can push it to the one after that, that's fine.
Well,
It's
I
up to you
think
guys.
the one major issue I think we've already resolved tonight
Yeah.
relative to the traffic pattern around the building, that it is agreed that we will make it one way going on the right side of the building all the way around. So the way you get to the parking in the front is to go around the building. So I think that will address the,
So I would just have a recommendation. We could do the changes per the comments we got, and we could do those in the next couple weeks. Get those to the town, have those reviewed prior to the next meeting, so they're not waiting until the meeting in, after that. Does that make sense? So at least we could, at least get those smaller issues out of the way before the meeting.
I don't have the agenda for,
Okay. I left you one.
did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our next meeting. I need the
Oh,
one
for
for
April
April.
10th. No, the next available slot on that one is also 7:10.
All right, so that works out.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll just continue this to April 10th at 7:10. So do I have a motion for that?
So moved, yep.
No, is April 10th enough time?
It all depends how fast we get peer review comments.
Yeah, so it's up to you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we good?
we can always continue.
it was just the request that if, there could be something conveyed to the group doing the peer review report that, time is of the essence, and if we could get it as soon as it comes in, because, it's certainly understandable what Ken is saying. He has to then get that digested in order to have any type of viable response to the report.
Mr. Plunkett, we won't have anybody yet. We're gonna start the search and try to get somebody for our next meeting. So, but that may take a little bit.
Well, all right, so let me just back up one step. So I thought we were saying you wanted the 10th as the date. Are you saying that you don't want the 10th and you want the 27th?
27th
Yeah.
of February.
No, March.
March. So March 27th.
Only forward, Mr. Plunkett, we can't go backwards. I know February's nicer. I know.
That was a great meeting, but it's in the past.
The time goes so quickly.
All
yeah,
right,
it's
so
great.
we'll continue this with the potential that it may get continued on from that.
Okay, yeah.
So then we'll do the 7:10 on 3/27. All right, so we have a motion for that?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, that's not it. This is one. All right, that brings us to agenda item E, which as mentioned earlier, has requested to be continued. So do I have a motion to continue 118 Lumber Lane to 7 o'clock on 3/27?
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. That brings us to agenda item F, which is 30 Commerce Way, modification to site plan approval. Do I have a motion to waive the public reading?
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
maybe because I'm
Well, we'll let
closest
them
to
get
the
settled.
door.
If it's still
You guys
noisy.
should be able to plug right in right there.
I had a hard time hearing the gentleman at the podium.
Yeah, it was a lot, he was very quiet tonight, yeah.
Yeah, he was just speaking very quietly as far away.
Once you're settled, if you just give your names for the record, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Christine Hung from Reamer and Bronstein, attorney for the applicant. With me tonight, I have Tyler Murphy from Rhino Capital, Dan Dumay, our traffic engineer from MDM Transportation, and Greg DeBona, our site civil engineer from Buller Engineering. As you may recall, we were before this board last fall, in which this board unanimously approved a site plan special permit for an industrial warehouse building, approximately 87,000 square feet with associated site improvements, stormwater management. Since that time, due to the volatility of the capital markets and which ultimately affects the tenant market, we are back before you guys to request an amendment or a modification to the approved site plan to reduce the size of the building from the 87,000 square feet to 65,000 square feet. With the stormwater management, we are now going to make the parking compliant with the zoning and also requesting to bank an additional 6 loading docks. Overall, these changes to the site plan reduce the impacts to the building from traffic and the site conditions which our consultants will discuss in this presentation. Right now, I'll turn it over to Tyler Murphy, who will further discuss the modifications.
Thank you, Christine. So I'll just briefly go through this just to shed a little bit more light on what drove this change. So Christine mentioned the capital markets, which does affect our tenant markets. Our goal here, and has always been with the speculative development, is to have a successful project. And what defines a successful project is ultimately leasing the building and creating jobs. And so back when we started this process, at the beginning of last year, the majority of the tenant demand was basically between 50 and 150,000 square foot for your typical warehouse tenant. That was about 80% of the market. That, in fact, has shrunk a little bit. It's now closer to 50 to 100, with most of those tenants being closer to the 50,000 square foot range. So everything we try to do with a speculative building is always trying to meet tenant demand the best we can. And that's where that comment of kind of cast the widest net is the term that we use. Some of the items that we had before, the 87,000 square foot building was an L shape, which does restrict some of the tenant market a little bit. It's a more unique shape, more untraditional. By shrinking that building down to 66,000 square feet, it unlocked some more site area. So instead of asking for a waiver from the zoning bylaw, we're able to basically meet the parking requirement with just 66 on the dot, and then banking the rest. That's one per thousand. And the loading dock layout, the reason why we're banking some, generally it's just to create more flexibility. We don't exactly know the type of tenant and what their day-to-day operation will look like. So by having a wider area of loading docks or more linear footage of loading docks, it provides us more flexibility to be able to provide something that works for them. And again, just using that term, trying to cast a wider net. So this is kind of our old schedule there and all the meetings that we had with the board and with the town. We're now sort of in that orange section, so we got our IDR comments. Friday of last week, we are obviously now in front of the planning board here, and we have our conservation hearing next Wednesday. I think from the conservation hearing perspective, not that we need to get into that, but all the impacts are less across the board. And just so this board knows, from the environmental standpoint, again, impacts are less across the board with the smaller building. With that, I will turn it over to Greg so we can go through sort of the side-by-side comparison.
Yeah, good to see everybody again. We had a lot of great meetings last year, so when Tyler called me and said, we're gonna make the building smaller, I kind of laughed a little bit because I said, we never get that opportunity from the engineering side, where the client will call you and say, oh, good news, we're gonna actually shrink things in a little bit. So what I did with these slides is I just did a complete side-by-side. So everything on the left reflects what we presented last time and what got approved with the larger building, again, that L-shaped building. And then you can see on the right how really we kind of actually just made it more of a simplified box, reducing the size down pretty significantly down to a 65,790 square foot warehouse. And what we did was, now that we were working in a smaller footprint, we had some more opportunity to provide additional parking, again, building in more flexibility so that as the market adjusts, as the demand is there, we don't have to continually come back and suggest more changes every time we have a tenant. We wanted to build in some flexibility now that we had the extra space. One of the things that changed is on the right-hand side of the plan in the loading dock area. Previously, we had loading that was kind of configured in that pocket in the back that was being created with the L-shaped building. This time, we kind of opened up the entire side so that loading, the loading docks and the loading court really has all that flexibility and more open space so that, again, future tenants, we're proposing up front that 6 loading docks and a roll-up door be proposed right out of the gate. However, we do acknowledge that later on, if a certain tenant is looking for additional dock space, we could accommodate along the building, which is why we're calling it out banked loading bays, similar to how we were proposing banked parking spaces last time around as well. Again, the outer edge, if you're looking from side to side, the outer edge, the outer limit of the curve, the retaining walls, all of that stayed within the same footprint. We just kind of actually shrunk it down a little bit more. We did propose some additional parking availability around the back of the building. This also does provide us an opportunity for if this building were ever to be split with multi-tenant, it gives some flexibility for parking and changes of loading that purpose as well. One thing that we were able to accomplish with the smaller building is also just a reconfiguration of our stormwater management. We had more green space to work with. We were able to provide a bigger above-ground stormwater basin, so we were able to eliminate one of the 2 underground basins. I'll talk about that in the next slide. But one thing I want to bring to everybody's attention is the area in the upper left-hand corner of the plan where we had the wetlands and the wetland buffers. You can see how in the prior layout we had our access path that had some retaining walls, and it was really kind of tucked in there because we were very, very close to that edge of the property and trying to make that maintenance access road available down to the basin. By pulling everything further inward, we now have a much longer area to make up the grade. It's a much more traditional straight path down to the basin. We don't need the retaining walls anymore, and we're able to pull out a lot of the disturbance within that buffer that we previously had. So we have more existing vegetation to remain and less disturbance up in that corner. So with this new layout, as we noted, we have a total of 91 spaces, 25 of which are bank spaces. Most of those banked are located in the rear. Again, not intending to build those outright out front, but wanting the flexibility to be able to put those in the future if we have a tenant demand that warrants it. In the prior project, we talked a lot about having the rear of the site blocked off with emergency access gates so that the truck circulation does not go around. Those gates are still present. We didn't lose those. Those are still going to be there. And so that's still shown on the plan as well. This just showing the proposed grading and drainage. Again, side-by-side comparison. Overall perimeter limits are relatively exactly the same. Again, we had a little bit of some vegetative saving by not encroaching as much into the upper left-hand corner. We were able to increase the size of that stormwater detention basin and remove the underground basin. As noted there, the impervious coverage was still reduced with this layout, so we went from 32.8 down to 31.1, and again, improved the overall circulation of that basin maintenance access. Lighting, I just wanted to emphasize that, lighting fixtures, the total count is almost exactly the same. Previously, we talked about having the rear lights along the back of the building, all motion sensor. We're still doing the exact same thing today. So all those lights in the back are all motion censored only. And of course, we're still getting the 0.0 foot candle at the residential property line. So overall light levels not changing. The actual distance, because the building got more pulled into the middle of the site, the distance to the property line for those lights are even actually further away now than it was before. And the last I wanted to show is just kind of side by side of the landscape plan. Primarily, what you really see on the landscaping is all that restoration planting around the perimeter, all the areas where we had the 3-to-1 slope that tapered down from our development down to the wetland areas. The only reason that the plant selection and the plant count has been reduced is because we're actually proposing less replication and restoration area in that location in the upper left-hand corner. So previously, we were disturbing within that 30-foot buffer to the property line, and we were putting in more evergreens and plants along that way to replace the trees we're taking out. Now we're able to keep that buffer more intact and not disturb as close to the property line. So as a result, our net plants actually were a little bit less than what we had previously. But again, the intent is still the same, and we're keeping more of the mature vegetation. So I feel really good about that change. And again, last thing I'm going to mention, I know we're not talking conservation tonight, but in the previous plan, we had wetland disturbance that was close to around over 5,000 square feet, 5,500 roughly. Now we're less than 5,000, we're around like 4,800. So we feel really good about the fact that our replication area is still the same. We didn't take any of that away. So what we were replicating last time, we're still keeping the same amount, but we're just not disturbing as much.
Good evening, Dan Dumais with MDM Transportation. So as you remember, we had done a full traffic study for this project. We assumed a 90,000 square foot building in that original report back May 2022. It had gone out for peer review, and we had addressed all the issues in terms of traffic. We came back out in February of this year and looked at what it would mean in terms of trip generation and traffic and trucks for this smaller type building. So they're proposing the same land use code out there as a general warehouse. So the reduction in square footage is going to mean a small reduction in both truck traffic and vehicle trips. It's going to be inconsequential in terms of what we're looking at, though. It's about a 4-trip reduction in cars and maybe a 1-truck reduction. So we're kind of looking at the same exact generation and trip generator that we were looking at before. And again, it was reviewed by Beta. The layout of the docks themselves, proposing the 6 loading docks with the ability to go to 12. So that has no impact on truck generation for the site. This gives them easier layout of the space so they can load stuff through the building more easily. You can put a truck on one side versus the other, just give them more flexibility. And like they said, you have the potential to split the building into 2 smaller tenants. Same overall square footage, so we'd expect a very similar terms of trip generation. We'll answer up to questions from the board, or go back to Tyler.
Yeah, that's it for our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
I'm going to jump the line here just because I'm confused by something. If you don't know who the tenant is, and you don't know whether or not they're going to want or not want the additional bays, how can you be sure that it's not going to generate more truck traffic?
Well, first off, they're looking at the type of land use, so we're looking at a general warehouse type category. So the user themselves is going to, in the square footage of the building, is what dictates the amount of traffic generated by the user. If they came in with
numbers, yes.
If they came in with a different type of user, which we're not proposing here, like an Amazon or something, we don't have the parking or anything to support that, but that would generate more traffic. It could have the same amount of docks.
All right. Okay. Start, Mr. Fowler.
Well, believe it or not, because we spent so much time in this previously, I spent a lot of time at home, and I was able to answer the questions I had. So I'm all set.
Mr. Fratelli?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of my questions I had on my sheet here is, do you have a tenant now that they're changing the size of the building and the dimensions and so forth and modifying it, but you don't have a tenant, right? Okay, so we're reviewing the modifications. You're reducing the size of the building, you're adding no additional bays, you're adjusting the parking, but I have a ton of comments here from the town engineer, so are we okay with them, or where are we with those comments?
Yeah, no, let me clarify. So we did get the comment letter in. I think there's about 16 or 15 or 16 comments there. Honestly, those are very technical in nature. Most of them have to do with just some call outs and notes regarding the sewer connection.
Okay.
I have no problem addressing all those comments.
Okay. So we haven't resolved them yet?
No,
Okay.
they just came in on Friday.
Okay, all right, good. So Tyler, when you put up the graph of all the meetings that we've had,
Yeah.
I seen we had planning board hearing number 3.
Yes.
So that's when we finalized the planning board approval?
Correct. That was in September of last year.
It'd be nice if you had that up there, so you got everything else up there, but not planning board approval, so.
It's-
but
I
Just happened to pick up on that, I'm like, I see planning board hearing number 3, but nothing approved, so. But we did a lot of work on that, you know that, for a lot of weeks, but 3 hearings, we got it done, that was pretty good.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
but, with that, I think I'm all set. I mean, I like the change in the plans, making it smaller to a degree. But here's hoping we get a tenant. So, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
I think we discussed everything at the fall meeting when we were approved, and pending the review and response to the engineer's comments, I have no questions at this time.
Mr. Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my questions would be relative to the parking spaces that are getting added in the back of the building there. Because, you know, I remember that was kind of a little contentious area as far as keeping it dark out there. And I understand that you're leaving the gate, but, you know, I'm looking at something on your plan here, it's something in the neighborhood of 30+ parking spaces out there. And if there's gonna be a gate, you know, is that gonna facilitate regular parking traffic, employees in, employees out, nighttime, night shift potentially? And I know you say you're gonna leave all the lighting on motion, but is that really you know, a good option when you have people walking in and out of parking spaces there? Because I think keeping that in the dark in the back there was something that the neighbors had some, and I know you say there's not gonna be any foot candle increase or anything, but, and it's still gonna be on motion, but is that really practical to have all of those additional parking spaces in the back there without, you know, appreciably changing the, what we were looking for on our first approval?
Yeah, so let me, so the spaces that are being shown in the back there, out at the beginning, it's gonna be 16 spots. We do show more they're called out as part of the banked parking area. So that would be where those additional spots would be added if we were to include more, if we felt we had a tenant that needed more.
I'm looking at your overall site layout plan, C301.
Yeah, that includes all of it. That includes proposed and the bank spaces.
Okay, so some of those spaces in the back you're saying are gonna be the 25 banked spaces?
That's correct.
That are not gonna be used, you're gonna use them for snow storage?
That's correct.
Okay. And what would be the trigger that would, you know, take those parking spaces out of the bank and where they would have to be used for, you know, employee
Right.
parking or whatever?
So what we've identified, and let me clarify when I say banked spaces, what it means is we've already designed our infrastructure, our stormwater management, our lighting plan, et cetera, so that later on those parking spaces could be added. We understand that if we were to add banked parking spaces, and when I add them, I mean, well, we want to build them, that we would come back in front of this board and explain the tenant need and the justification for why we're ready to build those spaces then. So we don't plan on just building them arbitrarily. It's going to be driven based on a tenant need, and we'd come back and explain that at that point. Until that time, that's going to be all lawn area, and we're going to use it for additional snow storage.
Yeah, we don't want to build more than what we need. So it really would have to be a specific need and specific reason from a tenant driven. Otherwise, it just will remain as a landscape
Which could
area.
very likely happen
It's
if a tenant came in there.
certainly
And, you know,
possible.
We could be here 6 months from now. I mean, I would like to see a tenant in there so we would really know what's what there and what's, you know, so we're not kind of like, you know, working in hypotheticals here. I guess if there was going to be that level of parking in the back there, I'd like to see something, you know, a fence blocking headlights, that type of thing, because if there's parking, there's gonna be vehicles coming in and out of there on some kind of of schedule
Okay.
or a regular basis. Yeah, I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? That was, if I remember correctly, when we approved this, that was a concern of the residents behind there.
Well, and again, before, when you just look at the two comparisons, we had so much that driveway and that building goes so much further back to the north of the plan, which is why that intensity of whatever activity was happening back there, the lighting, et cetera, was that much further closer to the property line. Now that we've moved it pretty substantially back into the middle of the site, again, we're able to still have activity, but not have any of that light trespass in the back, and we still have.
I hear you, but if we could be thinking along the lines of trying to mitigate any light trespass from traffic, because there is going to be traffic, it's someday, most likely, going behind that building. And if we could address that now, then we'll just avoid a future problem with that.
Greg, is that guardrail against those spaces that I'm looking at here?
Yeah, it's a guardrail, but we
Yeah.
could
Yeah,
do
so
something with the fencing or something.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting. I think we already have something to put fencing of some type mounted to that's structurally sound.
Yeah.
So that's something that we could do. With the original, when we first presented the plan, back from what I call planning board hearing number 1, we had proposed originally that sort of gate scenario back there. That was off the bat. So that wasn't necessarily driven by a butter concern. One item that did come up during our hearings was moving them to motion sensor. So that was something that came out of the hearings, but we had led with not having that. And so it really came, frankly, from our design. I don't recall it being a request of a butters. There was other concerns from butters. I don't remember that being one of them. Regardless of that, we do have a structure that's there. Again, a structural item via guardrail that we could mount something to.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
So just my own space question. Where the road went before, behind the building in the old version, how much further away or in is the road now from where it used to be? How many feet?
John, let me see if I can-
I don't know.
The best gauge is probably those buffer lines, which show the first dash line to closest to the wetland is 25 feet, followed by the second line, which is 50, and then the third is 100 foot. So I'd say previously, we had the edge of our driveway roughly 60 feet from the limit of that wetland. Now we're looking at, in that same corner, we're over 100 feet away. As you get closer to the close corner of the building, we're at, we're roughly about 75 feet away from that
So
edge.
you've come away from the property line
That's correct.
50 to 75 feet more.
That's right.
Than previously.
Yes, that's the best way to put it. That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, between that amount of additional space before you're gonna get to the end of the property, and as well as, you know, having it so that you guys have to come back if you're going to build the parking, for us to see how, you know, you're gonna do that. I think between those two, I don't have an issue with that. You know, I mean, that's a pretty significant change in distance from where you were before to where that road runs now. All right, other than that, I don't really have anything else on that. I asked my question on the bays. I'm still a little concerned about the change from the 6 to the potentially 12. You know, I know the numbers are saying one thing, but it's just in my head, feels like if somebody needs the more bays, the reason they need more bays is because of there'd be more trucks. So, I mean, I understand that the trip generation numbers may
So
Mm-hmm.
what
come out.
What it usually ends up on a type of warehouse like this, and it's kind of why they're going with the square building, is it's moving materials within the building itself. So they may stage stuff on one side of the building, whereas on the old one, they had to wheel it all the way around. So it's more convenient for them to stack it on one side and use that bay. And then they'll have other stuff stacked on the other side. And if that truck comes in, they use that bay. So they're not gonna use 12 at once. It's strategically within the building. So that's generally why some of them have more, some of them have less. But the square footage of the use is what's setting the trips.
Okay, all right. I don't have anything else for that, so I'll open up to the audience. Anyone in the audience with any questions, comments, or concerns on this? Seeing none, once, twice, all right, return it to the board. What is the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
No?
Nope, we gotta continue this one because they're not done with the engineer.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, may I request, if it pleases the board, because we don't see that these are any major issues that the engineer had in terms of comments, that we feel that we can satisfy them and comply with them, that if we could condition it so that prior to the issuance of a building permit and we think we'll be able to get this done within the next couple of weeks, but prior to the issuance of the building permit, that we won't be issued that until the town engineer is satisfied with the comments. So that,
I'll ask the board, but that's something we've tried to get away from doing and leaving those open-ended things. I mean, there's 16 comments on here. Sure, they're probably technical and not important, but there's a reason he gets paid to do that and we don't. I don't know if the board wants to do that or not.
I agree with you on that, Mr. Chairman. I think there's 15 items here. I mean, you say they're relatively small items, let's just get them done, come on back, and we'll get it taken care of, in my opinion.
Mr. Vitale?
I don't have a problem, Mr. Chairman. We've done so much work with these people in the past, and they've complied with everything else, so, I mean, I know it's not our policy, but I will go either way.
Mr. Champa?
I kind of feel along the same line as Mr. Fratalia, that they've been before the board and acted in good faith thus far on everything we've asked of them. And I trust our town engineer that in his judgment, if he is satisfied with their final plans and whatnot, that we don't need to have them come back.
Mr. Fowler?
I feel the same way.
All right, so you've got a majority of folks who feel that way, that's fine. I'll say this just as, because I'll say it to anybody when we do this. Once we close it and we're done, if you have issues with the town engineer, they're between you guys because you can't come back here anymore.
right, we understand
All right,
that.
so if you guys get into a disagreement over something and wish we could, give you a waiver or whatever it is, you're out of luck, so that's your choice. So that's the way you want to go?
That's
We
not a
feel
problem.
good? Okay, we feel comfortable.
So the
Thank
issues
you.
are that's minor, that they can be resolved pretty easily?
Very easily,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
All right, then I will go back to Mr. Champa. Mr. Champa, you were saying?
In hindsight, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right, so we have a motion made, do I have a second? I have one second.
Second.
Motion made, second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, so as to the modification of the site plan, what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the modified site plan,
All right, incorporating,
contingent upon, great, I can't.
for the parking?
No,
Contingent upon conformance with the town engineer's comments in his final approval.
Correct.
And then the other was the parking, that they're coming back in the event they actually want to do the parking in the back.
Right.
They come back to the board for that. All right.
Yes.
Can we make that, is that something we can make a non-substantial change, or do we have to make it?
Because it would be a modification of 10 parking spaces or more, they would have to come back to the board for a formal hearing
All right,
to
so that's
activate
fine.
those
Okay,
spaces.
that's fine, so then we'll just do it that way. All right, so we have that motion made, we have a second?
Second.
Motion made, second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Yep.
Okay, so it's 4-1. All right, so you're all set.
Thank you very
All right.
much. And I just want to thank Alex for all of her assistance throughout this process. She's very great to work with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, moving on to agenda item G, 2504 Main Street, site plan review. This is continued from our 227 meeting.
Good evening. While Jim is getting set up, I'll just introduce myself. I'm attorney Blake Mensing. Obviously, you didn't see me the last time. I apologize. I was unavailable. But just really quickly, I used to be a municipal attorney. I used to be a local regulator, and all I've done for the last 5 years is represent cannabis businesses. So I'm really just here to answer any questions on the cannabis regulatory side. And I'm proud to represent, Steve Doherty here. Grew up on Virginia Road in town. These are local folks looking to get into this industry. So just thanks to the board.
Jim Hanley, Civil Design Consultants.
And Ron Mueller, here representing Chapel Engineering, traffic consultant for the project.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll kind of walk through what progress we've made since the last time we were with you. So, just to give you a sense for timing and the dates of what was done when, we got our first DPW review letter on the 20th of January. We provided a response just before the meeting that we attended, which was 2/16. The hearing was 2/27. At that point, we got your comments. We went back to the drawing board. We tried to advance the design further. We resubmitted on the 16th, asked for and received the traffic memo from Chapel Engineering that Ron can speak about tonight. Just last week, we got a second review letter from DPW, and in the interest of trying to move it along, we did make modifications. We sent that over to Alex, admittedly very late. It was Friday. We got it on Thursday. It was Friday. The modifications are rather minor, and if you give me the couple of minutes to just walk through what we...
Watch the cord.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. Got it.
Thanks a lot.
So, DPW put their comments in a format that provided basically their original comments from their original letter, which was on January 20th. And then they had 4 new comments. So I'll just kind of take you through our response letter, which was dated last Friday. One item that they asked for some additional information on was the impervious area removal summary. This is something that we prepared. We showed where the existing impervious surface is. And then in green here, we show where we're removing existing impervious and converting that over to pervious. So we've reconfirmed our numbers of an 11.2% reduction in impervious surface. DPW asked for some additional detail on sheet, I think it's C4, which is the layout and materials plan. The grading plan. I just kind of want to revisit where we started with this project. So we have an existing vacant site. We're coming to you for site plan review. The modifications that we're proposing really are limited to trying to make the best improvement on the site and still maximizing the parking above and beyond what's required, but also improving accessibility. So this is not a brand-new parking lot. We're eliminating portions of the parking lot and repaving only a small portion as shown on sheet C4 by the dotted hatch. Because of that, most of the parking lot is existing. And we didn't provide spot grades on additional pavement because it's not really necessary. But in the interest of just providing and addressing the comment, we modified the plan, provided some additional spot grades to show exactly what we're proposing on site. There was also a comment relative to no stormwater improvements, and that's the case. We actually have an 11% reduction in impervious surface. We're not proposing to change drainage patterns at all. The modifications to the pavement are made consistent with the existing flow lines so that it'll function when we're done as it functions now, which is adequately. The last existing or original comment has to do with fire truck access to the lot. Again, I'll just kind of note that this is an existing lot that was approved by the town some 25 years ago for specific use. We can't get today's ladder truck in based on the geometry of the truck, the geometry of the site, and what the software is telling us are the moving limitations of that vehicle. This is something that I mentioned during the first meeting. I wanted to be upfront with you. We can't get the vehicle in through the site. We can provide access along 38, and then we also have a driveway, and then we also have a parking lot. So on 3 sides, we are providing, there is available access for staging for any kind of an emergency. There were a couple, 4 comments here that were new comments that we got last week. One thing that was brought up was a sidewalk. Where we stand on that is our position was we're really trying to make modifications to the lot to make an improvement. I kind of, you know, the scale of the improvements that we're proposing were so minor that we didn't think that the sidewalk was a realistic, reasonable addition to this, just based on the fact that we need 120 feet of new sidewalk for an existing site. And in addition to that, there's a sidewalk on the other side of Main Street, right? But we put this together. Alex responded back showing me the specific portion of the zoning. Zoning requires it, and so once we realized that, I reached out to DPW and asked for a fee and lieu number. And if we were to move this forward, what we'd like to be able to do is have the fee and lieu number as an option if we were to move forward. There's 2 traffic comments that I'll let Ron get to. The third comment here was asking us to put a legend on the plan, which we took care of. So I think that's basically the responses back to DPW. So just to recap, so we're all on the same page, I gave them an exhibit that shows the impervious surface. We added the detail to the grading and drainage plan. We're not contending that a fire truck can get through this site. We're just telling you what we can do. And if the sidewalk is in fact required, we'd like the option for the fee and lieu. With that said, those are the site issues. There was a couple of comments relative to traffic that Ron can try to address.
Sure. So one of the comments was that this project may require a DOT access permit because of the change in use. That is, DOT basically has thresholds, volume and parking thresholds that they employ for when an access permit is needed for a project, even for a redevelopment project. So since we're not changing the access to the site, when there's no physical changes being made within the state highway layout, and the change in use doesn't even come close to meeting any of these traffic or parking thresholds, a state highway access permit will not be required for this project. Just as an example, the traffic threshold is 2,000 trips per day. This project will generate 490. The parking threshold is 300 parking spaces. This project will have 18. So it's not even close to requiring that. The other thing is that DPW questions the comparison that we made to the former Sal's restaurant site. One, he noted that the site's been vacant for quite a long time, and whether that comparison is still valid. We put that information out there for you so that you have a rough idea of how these numbers compare. He also questioned the use of one of the ITE land use categories called fast casual restaurant, stating that there's only one study site available from the ITE manual. That is true for daily and morning peak hour generation. It's not true for the critical weekday PM peak hour, which is when this project would actually increase traffic. Actually, the ITE provides 3 study sites for fast casual restaurants. And the reason we chose fast casual as a comparison is because it actually produces lower trip generation numbers for the Sal's restaurant than using fast food restaurant category, which we could have also used. Had we used fast food category, the dispensary would actually show to be generating significantly less traffic than a fast food restaurant. So we would try to be a more conservative or possibly realistic comparison to what Sal's probably generated at the time. He did request that we provide more detailed information on traffic to the board. And I guess we're requesting by my explanation that that really isn't necessary for this project, based on the relatively small increase in traffic.
I already saw Ms. Slaughter move the microphone, not even looking, so.
Just wanted to add some context, thank you, Mr. Chairman, regarding the fire truck turnaround. This was a similar question when the Woodhaven came for redevelopment back in the fall. The fire department, of course, understood that while that is a tough site, they certainly don't expect any material changes to the site to improve access for the trucks. You know, presumably if it's been operating that way for decades, it can continue the way it is now. Just wanted to add that clarification so that even though it is noted in the engineer's report, you know, based on discussions with the fire prevention officer, Captain Sawicki, and the deputy fire chief, that's just kind of an understanding for site redevelopment that they accept.
So is it possible, you know, and I know they don't love sending us letters, but, you know, basically, if we had something maybe that just said, you know, they don't see this as any greater of a problem than if it was just simply reopened as Sal's tomorrow.
Sure.
You know, just so we have, you know, that sort of comfort that, you know,
Part of the
they expect to operate under the same, you know, plan as they would have before if anything ever happened at that site.
Sure.
Thank you. All right. Is there, that was it?
That's it,
You-
yeah.
Anything else? All right. I'll bring it to the board. We'll start with Mr. Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I've thought about this, not only on this site, but on other small sites. I did spend a few years on the fire department. I did review plans. I reviewed plans here. And my question is, if you, and I know why they use the ladder truck, because the ladder truck is the biggest piece of apparatus they have, so if that'll go in, anything will go in. But when you respond to this site, the first two pieces of apparatus are regular engines, not the ladder truck. The ladder truck would come secondly, from the center. The first one in would be from the engine 2, which is right up the street. That's an engine. So they, when they go in there, and I'll back up, the first thing in would either be an engine or ambulance. The ambulance obviously would go around this very easily. The engine would more than likely, and I think it's too bad no one ever asked that to be done. So to see if the plan could be used for the engines to kind of take the curse away from this, ooh, the fire department can't get in there, because I'm not sure if that's true. But I like what you said, Alex, so I appreciate that, because we're working with them. The sidewalk, that's an issue that would be with the DPW, and I guess that's all I have now. Thank you.
Before I move on, Mr. Fowler, you mentioned that no one's ever asked for them to do that with the engine.
Right. I don't think because
Mr. Fowler just asked, can you run it with the engine and tell us what it would look like? Or a comparable vehicle? I mean, I know they start with the ladder truck and buses, you know, for whatever you're doing, but if you've got something dangerously close, just, again, because it's not a requirement at this point to show us, because we know the ladder truck is not going to fit. But as Mr. Fowler pointed out, sort of that, you know, the slightly better feel about things, if it might show that the other apparatus, you know, would work, then, you know, it's another thing for the file, that helps.
So, what I can tell you is that we're not reducing the access to the site by any kind of field change, right? So, we're not making it more difficult to get around the site at all. To address the original comment from DPW's letter in January, we looked at bringing, first of all, obviously a passenger car, getting that through and around. But we also looked at a 30-foot garbage truck, so a 30-foot vehicle. And that vehicle, we aren't able to get it around the entire building, right? So we looked at that specific for trash pickup and also delivery pickup. And the way that would have to work is that they'd have to pull straight into the side or the top of that site, and then take a three-point turn down the entrance aisle before it came up. So even a trash truck, right, has difficulty getting around this site altogether, but that's about 30 feet, give or take, which the engine would be at least that, I would assume.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry, so, you had something, that's fine. Mr. Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question I have, and I'm going to ask every applicant, is this a rental, a lease agreement, or is it a purchase agreement?
My client owns the property.
Owns the property?
Yeah, he'll be leasing it to the to-be licensed entity.
Okay. So, like I've asked in the past, is long-term lease, short-term lease, or how's that going to work?
I mean, since he's renting it to himself, I think he can choose whatever duration he wants to.
I get you. So,
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so fine, I got you. I didn't understand that in the beginning, but now I do. Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Fowler's comments about the fire truck, Mr. Hanley, with that being said, Mr. Fowler, if the engine company comes first, we will probably never get a fire truck around the building with the engine company in the front blocking most of the facilities anyway. So, I mean, that's understandable and very apropos, I guess, for this particular site as well. So, Mr. Mueller, I know you've seen us before, right? Chappelle Engineering, is that your company or?
I'm transitioning my business to them.
Okay, because
I'm still involved.
I'm reading the comments from Kirsten Braun.
Right.
All right,
My
and that's,
associate.
pardon me?
She's my associate.
Okay. So I happen to see it saying that there's not going to be significant traffic coming from this site. I just kind of, I don't know how we can assume there's not going to be a lot of traffic because of the number of trip generations that she's proposed, but, and the fact that it's on 38 in a plaza like that, so.
Well, the trip generation, as you know, I'm sure, comes from the ITE manual.
Yeah.
And they have a category for marijuana dispensaries based on the square footage of the store. So, as I'm sure you've heard in presentations tonight already. So that's where these numbers come from.
Yeah.
So those are the numbers we can reasonably expect to see, although I will tell you that the ITE studies that were done out in Oregon, Colorado, were done only maybe a couple of years, within 1 or 2 years after those dispensaries first opened. I suspect that trip generation for stores in Massachusetts now are pretty much or significantly lower than these numbers. We have more than 150 dispensaries open in Massachusetts now.
Yeah.
These aren't a novelty. There's no novelty associated with these than the first few stores that opened up. I'm sure everybody heard those horror stories.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're going to see those kinds of numbers with the store size of this.
And if I may, through the chair, yeah, since this is all I do, I have some real-time data. I also happen to own part of the store out in Holyoke.
Yeah.
We see at our busiest day about 350 customers through the door. It's a little bit bigger population than here, but not, orders of magnitude. And actually, the number of stores open is closer to 270 in the state. So it's just a function of how far are people willing to drive. When there were a few, people would drive a long way because of the novelty and the access to tested, regulated products. Today, even in Tewksbury, we're going to have up to 3, right? So the individual crush on one store won't be borne by just that one entity.
And the other thing to add to that, and I'm not sure that that's going to be the case with this particular dispensary, but many of them are now going to online ordering and home delivery, which will further reduce traffic.
Yeah, okay. All right, that was just a couple of my comments. I was reading the comments from her saying slightly more traffic, and it's more like double compared to what was there before. So, so the opening hours for the facility are going to be, any idea what time they're going to be opening?
I believe we've proposed 8 to 8, but Steve can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we requested the maximum that the zoning bylaw allows, and then it would just sort of be a business decision to truncate it if the customers, didn't warrant that.
Okay.
Is that, okay, yeah. So
So
that's,
so really, the AM peak hours are not even an issue at this point, correct, right?
You would assume, right?
Yeah, because it's a little later start. Some of the other ones are opening at 10 o'clock, I think, or something, so. So, with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm all set.
Thank you, Mr. Ty. Ms. Lawler?
I just wanted to know, I was going to pull up the regulations anyway. I think the earliest allowed opening is either 10 or 11 a.m. anyway. So yeah, the morning peak doesn't come into play, really.
whatever you allow is what we applied for.
All right, we'll go with Mr. Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned at our last applicant here, we really don't have any direct history of traffic impacts of retail marijuana establishments because we don't have any. It's kind of, we're sort of breaking new ground here. And that's why I think that generally the peer reviews are important. In your case, I think we're making such an inconsequential change. I think I could probably, be okay with the ITE report that I'm looking at here. So that aside, my question is on the sidewalks. First of all, I'm not sure, or I'm pretty sure that the planning board doesn't make decisions on sidewalks anymore. I think that's a DPW purview, if I'm not mistaken. I would prefer to see a sidewalk in there. The in lieu of money is that with the town has taken in the past is just, sitting in a drawer somewhere, not doing much good for the town. So, as you can see over the last several years, Tewksbury's connected a lot of pieces of sidewalk and made, some nice walkable areas in town. And that would be my hope on that would be included in the project. And that's really all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Champa?
Just another comment on sidewalk, and I'm not sure if anyone has the answer, but when we approved Woodhaven, were they adding sidewalk to their? Pre-existing. So they have pre-existing sidewalk? So this would be a situation where we have some sidewalk and it's stopping before we get to this site. And I know based on Google Street View that, it stops when you start getting a little further down. But, I walk my dog all over town and I love sidewalks. So my preference would be to see a sidewalk go in as opposed to the ILO money.
Good, all set otherwise? So my only question is, because the only thing is I hate island sidewalks. So, yeah, we have in front of excuse me, we don't have sidewalks going in as part of Hobart's, do we?
I would have to look at those approved plans, but we do have the engineer who put those plans together who could tell you.
Yeah,
do?
I believe we do. I haven't looked at them for a bit.
All right, so, I'm more likely to agree with everybody else if we're
Yeah.
going Woodland, Hobart's, that feels connectable, because, the only thing is, where the sidewalk runs the entire other side, what the likelihood of us actually connecting all of that up beyond those couple of places, that's when I start to wonder, does it make sense to take that and add it in a place where we're really trying to connect something?
And I think that's a fair discussion to have with DPW and have that be an argument,
And
certainly.
To Mr. Duffy's point, since this isn't really an us thing in terms of, we're not, they've got their plans for how they want to do sidewalks. DPW says, really, we'd rather take the fee in lieu of because we know a place we want to do this. I'm fine with deferring to that. Otherwise, I'm with everybody else that, it looks like we are gonna have some sidewalk possibly there. How useful it is for someone, sure, maybe if they're going between those places, yeah, maybe it really does make sense. The folks at Woodland may want to walk up to your establishment and use the sidewalk and hit Hobart's in between, one way or the other. So, sure, there may actually be some sense to that,
Mr. Chair, if I may, if the sidewalk would be a sort of decision touch point that would make this a yes, then my client is happy to just put the sidewalks in.
Yep.
Like I said, I would like to hear what DPW says, because I'm fine with leaning towards their preference. whatever that is. It's gonna be one or the other though, so I mean, I think that's where you're coming down, so, all right? Otherwise, you know, I'm kind of with everybody else. I mean, we know the site, we know what its old use was, we also know what its old limitations were. You know, we're not really messing too much with that. You know, this use isn't, you know, onerous in terms of being so drastically different from what was there, for in and out purposes and that kind of thing. You know, if anything, the previous business cooked, you know, and we weren't as concerned about the fire apparatus showing up. This one, no cooking. So, you know, not that stuff can't happen, but I mean, you know, we're not talking about the potential for coming and trying to put out a grease fire. You know, it's just not gonna happen. So, for those reasons, I don't have, you know, too many concerns from the apparatus, you know, not being able to work all the way around it. But otherwise, I'm all set for now. Open it up to the audience. Anyone in the audience, any questions, comments, or concerns? Oh,
Sorry, I had two minor technical things that I just wanted to bring up. You know, of course, a lawyer would say that. We would request a minor amendment to the application just because of the way the Cannabis Control Commission application process works. And I did note the provision in the bylaw that said a site plan is not transferable. So Steve applied as an individual. We're just requesting it to be in the entity name, which is Cannifords Inc. Same proposal, same project, same property. We would get hung up at the commission level if they see an individual, because an individual can't get a cannabis license. You have to have a business that has it.
Sure, so the remedy to that, just submit a revised application form with the name that you plan to pursue with the license, and that can come along with any revised plans or other submittals that need to come in, and I can make sure that the approval reads that way.
Okay, yeah, nothing else would change, just literally the name. And then just one other, again, having been a municipal attorney, I've read, I don't know how many bylaws, but there was a technical issue that's actually impossible to comply with in your zoning bylaw. It says in order to apply for a building permit, you need to have your final CCC license. You can't get your final CCC license without a certificate of occupancy. So you obviously can't get a certificate of occupancy without a building permit.
Sure, is that the zoning bylaw or is that the general bylaw?
I honestly can't recall at the moment.
Okay, if you want to send me the citation,
Okay.
I can take a look at that. And
No,
obviously,
it
we
was-
want to do anything that can't happen, but I just want to make sure I have
It was
it.
8.7, which I do believe is the zoning.
Zoning, yep.
Okay.
Just. So this will be the second one, time-wise, that we have to fix. I believe the select board fixed their time problem that Mr. Fratalia brought up.
Yes, they did.
So this will be another one, it's another little tweak to it that we need to make sure we aren't screwing people up when they go in for the last part of the process. All right, so yeah, no problem with the name thing, just get that paperwork in, because if we get to the point where we're approving it, that point, we need the name to be right, we backdate and everything, so. All right, so with that, then I will open it up to the audience. Anyone in the audience with any questions, comments, or concerns at this time? Would you step up to the podium, give your name and your address, and the floor is yours.
And my name's Dylan Sonatis. I'm in a budding property from where Sal's used to be. Address 2477 Main Street. So my concern is the litter that we're already dealing with from Hobart's. I go out and cut the grass, and I'm constantly picking up nips and needles last year. So it is a big concern to me to have a dispensary right next to that establishment that sells alcohol.
Okay. So, I don't know, would you have some comment to that?
I guess what I would just say is many neighbors through the years have expressed concerns about, what would a store do to the neighborhood. I have a client on the medical side who actually he's out in Arizona, he got a letter from the sheriff saying, thank you for putting your dispensary here. The criminals in the area know this is now a no crime zone because every square inch on the property in the building is on camera footage. It's stored for a period of time. I would also say, people's sort of images of what a stoner or the clientele might look like, I don't think would reflect what people actually look like walking in through the doors. There's a Cannabis Control Commission required no loitering policy. Typically, you'll have a staff member sort of standing outside to sort of direct people from their cars, check an ID before they come in. And I think a function of that is just making sure no one's hanging about. As I said, there's an anti-loitering policy. So yeah, I would suggest that, you do a little reading on, what has happened in other towns. Obviously, people always ask me, would you want one of these right next to your house? And that's a terrible question to ask me because I'm a dyed-in-the-wool, stoner for 25 years. But yeah, it's not the rowdy bar crowd or anything like that. I think it's really just going to be sort of regular folks coming in and out and leaving. Consumption on site isn't allowed. Public consumption in and of itself is a $100 ticket, so I don't think people want to deal with that just for doing something they could do at home. But yeah, I appreciate your concerns, and I think the way my client looked at it, they look at the zoning map and say, where is this allowed in the town? So that, I think, was the primary function of how they chose the site.
I appreciate his comments, but I just don't trust, from what I've done from my own research. Like I said, you guys approved Hobart's to sell alcohol, and myself, my neighbors were constantly picking up litter from that. I also have two small kids.
We didn't approve Hobart to sell liquor.
Okay, sorry, excuse me, I redact that statement. No problem. But regardless, I have two small children that I'm trying to raise the proper way, so going outside, playing with them, having them be around nips and needles, and I'm just not confident that this dispensary is going to attract the right crowd, along with the alcohol sales that have already taken place.
I do want to be careful, though, that we're mixing and matching
understand.
different businesses.
I understand.
I understand your concerns.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else with any questions, comments, or concerns at this time? Once, twice, sold. All right, bring it back up to the board. What's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Nope, I don't think
We're not there?
no, I
No,
think.
We have some issues,
We're gonna
right?
continue.
This one's another continuation?
Yeah. I mean, because we got the name issue, so I don't want to approve this. You haven't even put in the name change, so I don't want to do that until they've put in the paperwork to change that.
Understood.
Otherwise, maybe, but the other thing too is with this is the new thing. I want to do everything, I's dotted, T's crossed. I don't want any issues down the line for anybody. So let's let them get that name stuff squared away, and then the 27th probably, I
So-
suspect.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I think normally go along with that, agree with it, understand it. A little concerned about the potential for the board's personnel to change, right? I think.
Not on the 27th.
Not on
We don't have the
the
election until
April
the 1st. So,
Okay, okay.
so,
I honestly just have one other concern. The Board of Selectmen is taking the position, and it's obviously based on the bylaw, that my client can't apply for a Board of Selectmen license until the site plan review has been approved. So I would just ask if it's.
well, here's your problem with that anyways, because even if we did this, we'd make it contingent on squaring away anything that's left outstanding. It's not gonna speed your process up all that much anyways.
That's not what I was going to say.
Go ahead, sir.
All I was going to say is just my hope would be that the board would be consistent in requiring the same thing from other cannabis applicants. So my client, who I believe was the first to apply, isn't sort of lapped by virtue of these, what I would view as relatively minor things to address. So that's all I'm saying. We're not asking to be
We
approved
approved
tonight.
another one?
I'm just saying, if you do next, right? That's all I'm saying.
Okay, all right. So,
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, if it would give the applicant any level of comfort, we can certainly put them on the agenda first for March 27th, if that semantic makes you feel better.
That does make me feel much better. Thank
Okay.
you.
all right, so then we're making that, we'll be making that for 7 PM as well?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion to continue till 7 PM on the 27th. We have a motion made, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much. Appreciate it.
Getting bigger if you can't.
You'll get there, you almost got, you get the next one. All right.
I'm just an optimist at heart.
I understand, I understand. This. All right. Moving on to agenda item H, 20, yes, sir. I know, right. We make, you know what, I might. All right, moving on to agenda item H, which is 2122 Main Street. This is continued from our 227 meeting as well. once you guys are all squared away and settled, if you just give your names to the record, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you to the chair and members of the board. Back again with the Stories Company for marijuana retailer application at 2122 Main Street. We're joined by Ian Aisley, our professional engineer from Meisner Brim, and we're also joined by Kim Hazarvarshian, our traffic engineer from TEP LLC. One of the things that we had spoken about last time was if we could get you any additional information, even though it may not have had the opportunity to be fully peer reviewed, particularly traffic, let's do that. And so we did. We brought in hard copies at the end of last week. And that's one of the different things that we've updated. We're not completely there yet, but we hope in the next 48 hours to be there. But we do have some new things to discuss to keep the process moving along, as seemed to be the board's wish. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ian to discuss what the supplemental, what's been added since our last meeting.
So as Valerio said, we're still working on the technical comments that were given to us by the planning department and the engineering department. We should be submitting a full package to address hopefully all of those this week. But in the meantime, we did get some material in last week for some of the items that came up at the previous meeting, both by you and by some of the neighbors, and our hope would be to discuss some of these, incorporate your feedback, and get that to the town staff to review. So some of those are the landscaping and screening for the neighbors. Some of that is traffic, and some of that is changes to the site plan itself, such as the fire department wanted 20-foot access around the building, and a couple other layout changes like that. So I'm going to start off by talking about the landscaping. Hear me okay? Yeah. So we had a landscaping plan done by a landscape architect, Lemon Brook. And our thought here is to provide screening for the residential neighbors as discussed at the previous meeting. We have arborvitae's back here in the back of the site. We're also showing a 6-foot-high fence as well to go along with those. The thought would be, 6 feet is a pretty reasonable size for a fence. We're happy to raise it if people wanted to see it go up. I will say that the combination of a fence and plantings that will be taller than that, I think that will provide something that screens effectively without being oppressing, you know what I mean, without being kind of a little dreary and too much. So we're happy to take any kind of feedback on that. We show the majority of the site to be mulched, and the reason for that is in opposition to grassing it. Grass takes a lot of care, maintenance, water, takes a lot of fertilizer, nutrients. The town has a stormwater bylaw that tries to reduce phosphorus, and nitrogen is another pollutant that is commonly trying to be reduced in that stormwater. And to have the manicured lawn, it takes a lot, like I said, of those nutrients to do that. So we thought by mulching it, we could reduce some of that. There's also been drought periods over the past couple of years. It takes a lot of water to maintain a manicured lawn like that. There's been towns that have imposed kind of water bans, irrigation water bans in the summers. So our thought was this would be a good way to, provide some landscaping without being too much, that would be a strain on the resources to keep alive. The site is very sandy. It absorbs water very quickly. So that's kind of another aspect of that as well. We don't want to plant a bunch of things and it's impossible to keep them alive. But we do have, like I said, screening here, plantings around the building. We have a row of junipers in the front to kind of make the front facade of the site look good. And so that's kind of the gist of what we tried to do. And I'm happy to kind of answer any questions from you or from the neighbors, any feedback, suggestions. We're happy to, to work with you.
All right, so we'll take the landscaping separate. Any of the members have any comments on landscape?
I want to comment that I like what you did with, if I may.
Yeah.
I like what you did on the curb with the junipers. That cuts down the headlight, which we discussed in an earlier meeting today. And of course, you have more room to work with, so. But no, very nice.
Junipers are pretty durable too. You know, if they're plowing, if there's anything going on up here and snow lands up on them, they'll survive that. They can handle some pressure on them. You don't want something very delicate in the front. So.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Very good, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Just one comment, because that juniperus is bordering the sidewalk. I know it will creep and grow over time. I just want to ask that it be properly maintained so that it does not impede sidewalk access.
Yeah, we could even, if you wanted to put that as a condition in the permit, you know, that the landscaping will
Appreciate
be,
that.
you know, that will be adequately maintained.
That's just something I know from again, I mentioned for a previous case that, you know, I walk my dog everywhere and, you know, sometimes I have to get off the sidewalk to get around some of the growth as it spreads out and is not maintained, so. Thank you.
Mr. Duffy, did you have anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just looking at the right side, you know, perpendicular to Main Street. Is there a new fence going in there too? I see a note that says the old fence is to remain. Is that new fence going to border the whole right side there?
Yeah, so there are existing fences out there.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I'm not quite sure who owns them. I'm not sure if it's the current property, this subject property, or if it's the neighbors. And I don't know if that's consistent across properties. So I don't know if we have the right to remove those fences. So our thought is that the existing fences, many of which are just off the property anyway, are going to remain. Unless the neighbors, you know, want to take them down of their own volition, or if they request us to take them down. But that will be there in addition to the new fence that we're putting in as well. And that fence does wrap around and come down, I would say, you know, roughly half of the property width on the right. And there is a pretty good amount of vegetation in between the commercial property over there that would provide that screening right now. So the fence doesn't come all the way to the front, but it comes up to that vegetation.
Okay, I think that would be, very neighborly if you were to work with the residents to see if they would like you to take those fences down, because I notice a lot of them are in very poor condition anyways, you know?
Yeah, we're happy to take them down. I just don't want to say we will, and we don't have the rights to do so, you know?
Sure,
So,
yeah, understood. Yeah, you might have to knock on a couple of doors or leave something in the mailbox or whatever. I think it's great that you're looking towards the drought-resistant landscaping. I have the same problem in my yard. Tewksbury's got a lot of sand, and if you want to have a lot of green grass, you have to use a lot of potable water generally, or get a well, one of the two.
Yeah.
So I think that's, I'm very happy to see that. I was just, the wood chips though, do they still allow wood chips around buildings, or?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah?
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought that you couldn't have wood chips because it was a fire hazard or something. I guess maybe that's just.
I think you have to do it a certain way, you know, the way they do it, you have to do it in a way that's safe.
Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, it's just bark mulch,
Bark mulch, that's what I'm saying.
that's all.
Yeah,
You can use it.
yeah. Okay. Just something that popped into my head there. So everything else on the landscape plan looks pretty good to me. What would the height on those juniperous horizontals be out in the front? Do you have any idea on that?
The junipers?
The height of those?
The height of them in the front?
Yeah.
Those generally, I mean, they're a shrub. I would say maybe 2 to 3 feet.
Yeah.
At the largest.
Okay.
You know?
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, thanks.
Mr. Vitale, anything?
Just one question, the height of the arborvitaes when they go in, how high are they be, and how high will they get?
So we typically use I believe the Green Giant arborvitaes. Those can get up to 12 to 15 feet tall.
Okay, so when you put them in, they'll be what, 6, 7?
Probably 6 to 8, something
Okay,
like that.
great.
Yeah.
That's all, I think it looks great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm all set.
Sure.
So Briefly through the chair, I know there's one of our abutters is here who definitely had a comment about the fences. I don't know when it would be appropriate, if it's at the end when you ask for public comment, but, you know, we've been engaging over the last week or so, and I just wanted to make sure we get their comments as well, and I'm gonna reach out to her again once we get the feedback from the board. I didn't want to present something that we didn't have.
Yeah, we'll do the
Yeah.
public comments
Okay.
all at once,
Yeah.
and then we can come back to the landscaping if that's all
Thank
that's discussed.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move on to some of the site plan changes. So one of the key things we've done on the site plan, and this was at the request of the fire department, they wanted 20 feet wide pavement around the building. We have done that. We moved the building forward a little bit, put some angle points kind of on the back corner of the building to fit everything in there, and we now have 20 feet all the way around the building. We did also submit a fire truck turning template that you should have that shows that a truck, Tewksbury's fire apparatus specifically, can navigate in, around, and out the site without leaving the pavement. We did make a couple changes that the board had requested as well. You had talked about possibly putting in more accessible spaces, handicap accessible, for the other business. We had 2 in front of the proposed dispensary. We've added 2 more in front of the other business that will go in there. So 2 are required for this amount of spaces. We have now a total of 4. We also did put in a walkway, pedestrian walkway, over to the spaces that are on the left side of the plan, which would be to the north, so that the people exiting the parking over here have a direct access to the building. And I believe that is the gist of what we've done for this. And I don't know if, Kim, if you want to start talking about traffic, or if the board had any questions about the site plan changes.
Yeah, through the chair, do we want to continue to sort of segregate the conversation? So now that we've done site plan
Let's go around
amendments.
quickly. Is there anything on the design, is the, also? No comment. Nothing? I'm good.
Thank you.
All set. All right, chair's all set as well.
Okay, so our hope was we kind of took the board's feedback and the staff feedback as well. And like I said, we do have more site plan changes coming, but those are kind of the main items that kind of directly influence the size and the character of the site, so.
And then with that, we have Kim Azavarshian, who ran our traffic study that has been, you know, probably the main topic to discuss this evening for the reason we came back. Kim?
Good evening, I'm Kim Hazavardian, traffic engineer with TEP LLC out of Salem, New Hampshire. I put together a traffic assessment memorandum, and a couple of things about the project I'm going to mention first. The driveway location is basically the existing curb cut location. Main Street is straight and level, so sight lines are good. The major component of the traffic assessment memorandum is trip generation. The trip generation used all the by-the-book published data from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. We used a proposed floor area of 2,700 square feet for the marijuana dispensary, and a potential use of the remaining 2,700 square feet as a strip retail plaza. The vehicle trips are presented in some detail in Table 1. I'm just going to give you the summary numbers in the bullets under that table. For the weekday PM street peak hour, we're talking 70 vehicle trips, 36 in and 34 out. And for the Saturday site peak hour, 96 vehicle trips, 48 in and 48 out. Now, not all of those trips are going to be added to the general area. Some of the retail trips, a small number of trips would be from pass-by trips or diverted from other roads in the area. But the numbers I stated don't reduce the number of trips because of that. We don't take a reduction in trips that are multi-purpose trips. Someone goes to the retail plaza and the marijuana dispensary. We count that as 2 trips in and out, not 1. And we don't take credit for any previous use of the site. So the numbers are full and conservative. Now, the numbers are less than 100 vehicle trips, and following Institute of Transportation Engineers guidance, that number is presumed to be a low-impact use. Generally, we would not do more analysis beyond trip generation given those numbers. We also looked at parking generation, and my understanding is that zoning requires 14 spaces for the marijuana dispensary use. I looked at the Institute of Transportation Engineers parking generation book for that use, and that calculation is 19 vehicles. The site has 43 spaces, which provides for the marijuana dispensary and also for retail use as well. So those are my key points, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We'll start with Mr. Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're expecting 100 cars per day in and out? Or no, more?
Well, no, not for the day. The 100 cars you're talking about are for the Saturday site peak hour, so that's 48 in and 48 out. Over the course of the day, on a weekday, it would be 717, and on a Saturday, it would be 847, spread out over the hours of operation.
Okay. Pretty good amount of cars, would you agree?
That's what the numbers are, and when we do a traffic analysis, we look at the peak hours because those present kind of the worst case. So we compare the 96 to, let's say, 100 vehicle trips, and that would be the impact during the peak hour. The other hours of the day, the number of trips is likely to be less. So we'd be looking at the critical case hour.
All right. So there's no morning peak hours, correct?
The facility isn't open in the morning.
Right.
And most retail uses don't open during the commuter hours either.
Well, you're not sure what's happening next door to the...
Correct.
So that could be a very busy peak hour for whoever goes in there. Would it be any food establishments going in there?
So definitely, right now, our goal is to either have office or retail. So food is sort of the outside thought. It seems like a less compatible use next to a dispensary, particularly with the concerns about parking and traffic. My suggestion, what we talked about internally was, should the site plan approval be awarded, we could make that a condition that no matter what use goes next door, even though, so the office use is far less cars than the retail use that we budgeted for in this, right? We've taken a conservative approach, and but to come back to the board. So even if we said retail now, no matter what that use is, we'll come back as a condition to discuss traffic, notice another hearing, have the abutters and public, whatever Alex thinks is an appropriate way to handle it. And that way, although we've come up with some conservative numbers and we didn't just say office space, 10 cars a day, you know, we've done more than that, but we'll still come back.
Sure.
Yeah, but we do not plan on doing food at this time, but no matter what it is, let's come back to the board, notice a new hearing, listen to the abutters and discuss the additional traffic concern. That would be our suggestion.
So one of the comments you have here regarding the traffic is there's no significant impact on area traffic operations. And I just have a question of whether that's accurate, knowing the area, knowing the amount of cars that are there during the afternoon hours. And Donna's Donuts, the next door neighbor, is extremely busy all parts of the day up until 2 or 3 in the afternoon, which reflects on your sales and your open operation hours. So, and they occupy a lot of the parking lot now. That's an agreement that goes through now, correct?
Yeah, so the Donna's Donuts, my understanding is they're particularly an early morning activity for, you know, construction folks and whatnot, getting donuts and getting coffee. It certainly wouldn't impact when we're open, because I think the earliest we can open under the bylaws, I think it's 10 a.m. And so we don't feel like we're gonna compete with Donna's and add that additional traffic. Because my understanding is they sort of have contractor trucks like sort of idling at 5 a.m., picking up coffee and donuts for the crew before they go out and do their day's work. And so we're not, you know, we're gonna be open later than that. So we hope that You know, we hope that our 100 cars an hour on the outside at our most highest peak hour, in fact, when you look at the total volume of traffic on that stretch of road, is in a sense somewhat negligible, right? It's not like we're proposing to add 100 cars to a residential neighborhood that only sees 40 cars in a day, right? We're adding 100 cars to a place that sees thousands of cars in a day, right? So, and that's why our approach is that it's somewhat of a negligible impact because we're not trying to run cars through a low traffic area. And so I think that's what, you know, Kim's analysis shows ultimately. It's like really 100 cars in an hour, when you look at all the cars that go through there, isn't really a significant impact.
All right, one last question I have. The owner is going to own the marijuana distributor?
Yeah, so actually, we have the current property owners in the audience tonight. I should have introduced them, I apologize. And so our plan is, if we're permitted, we have a purchase and sale, is to purchase the property and essentially lease it to ourselves. You know,
Okay.
it's a related entity. You know, it's not exactly us, but it's a family-related entity.
I got you. Okay. I'll set, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Duffy.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think I remember in our last go-around here that you had expressed a willingness to install a grease trap in case there was a food service type company that, and I think you said that you were willing to go forward with that at that time. Is that something that has changed since then, or?
No, I think we'd still be, if this is something that the board feels is important, is to put a grease trap so that we can be, you know, prepared for whatever use may come, we'll certainly do that at this point. But when we've had the internal discussions as to what's an appropriate use there, given the concerns with parking and traffic, we felt like sort of, you know, I think drive-throughs are not even allowed in that zoning area anyway, but we thought like a fast food type of, would just be more impactful than we wanted to have. It's just a lot more vehicle trips. So we thought it'd be less of an appropriate use for there. But just to cover our bases in case, you know, we don't know what's gonna happen in a few years, even though I've asked to have a condition of the approval be that we come back and discuss that new use and its parking and traffic implications. We would certainly, as part of this, put in a grease trap. So that
I mean, it's a relatively, during construction, a relatively.
Yeah, now's the time to do it.
Yeah.
Exactly, Mr. Duffy.
And, you know, right now, there's a lot of empty space on Main Street, and there's a lot of guys out there that I'm sure would like to see somebody come along with two employees and rent some space, but it's just not happening right now. There just doesn't seem to be that kind of a demand for that. So I think that would be a reasonable option, you know, for, you know, to at least have that kind of ready.
So let's agree to it, and then we could also add it as language in the permit to make it a condition of the approval, make it a condition of the approval that we install a grease trap.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
That's all I
Of
have,
course,
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Just a quick comment. I do believe on Saturday and Sunday mornings, there will probably be quite a bit of overlap on your early part. Dawn, as Mr. Vitale mentioned, their parking lot is pretty much jam-packed until, you know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the weekends. I know during the week, you're right, I'm one of the 5 a.m.ers out there with Stealth Construction and a few other trucks and vans. So that part, I agree 100%. All the construction traffic is pretty much done by about 7:30, and those customers are on their way to their job sites. But I think on the weekend, Donna's, you know, it's definitely a family gathering place. A lot of people come there after church, you know, the Methodist church is right down the street, a few others. So I just want to say, in your assessment of your traffic impact, there will be a few hours of overlap. And my question would be, what are your hours on Saturday and Sunday? Because one of our previous applicants had reduced hours. And when you take into account the increased traffic and the reduced amount of opening hours, you're actually looking at a car possibly about every 30 seconds coming in or out, which I think would have an impact when you add that to your other unknown business side and also what's going on there with Donna's. You could have a lot of people trying to get through. And I know the traffic trying to get in and out of Donna's in the morning, there's, you know, it can back up a little bit on 38, and then people are pulling into the parking lot at Boudillette's trying to get around them and so forth.
Yeah, so I mean, what we would request is obviously the maximum allowable hours under the bylaw. You know, if we were doing a cannabis customer every 30 seconds for 10 hours a day, that would be, 1,200 customers a day. Is that right? Am I thinking that right? So I mean, I don't know of any dispensaries that do that kind of business in Massachusetts. I mean, maybe Netta and Brookline, did it, but certainly, now that there's 260 something dispensaries open, I just can't foresee that amount of traffic. Yeah, so it's 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., thanks Ian, Monday through Saturday, and then 12 to 6 on Sunday. So at least the Sunday, we wouldn't be able to open till noon. And so that might just be 1 hour of overlap with Donna's. And then the Saturday hour starting at 10, maybe there'd be 3 hours of overlap. And what I'll do is, Kim and I can discuss that further. And I know we've met with Donna's, and the founder, Davis, has knocked on the doors in the neighborhood weeks ago. So we'll continue, to do that and work with them on making sure that, we do what we can to mitigate any additional traffic impact.
Okay, I guess,
Yeah.
so.
There's no perfect answer, right? If I could teleport people.
Of course not. We can't see everything, but I do know, I go to the gym, which is right next to Starbucks, which is right next to Al Fresca. And in the afternoon/evening, you've got 3 sets of people all trying to get in and out of 3 different sets of driveways for different things, and nobody knows who's doing what.
Yeah.
So somebody has a blinker on, and within 50 feet, and then 100 feet, and then 50 feet, you don't know which driveway. And my concern generally would be that Donna's and this establishment, you might see something similar where, you have a lot of competing traffic of people coming one way trying to turn in, people coming the other way trying to turn in, while people are also trying to get out. Again, in just a small peak window on Saturday.
Maybe 4 hours per weekend, we might have that.
Possibly.
I don't know if, and I could speak with Ian and Kim about this, I don't know if maybe additional, traffic signs around our lot. I know we've added at least 1 stop sign on the most recent iteration. I don't know if those would help combat this issue. We can certainly, think about it, brainstorm, and see what else we might be able to add. But I understand the concern. I've been over to the site. Donna's is a fairly popular place.
It is.
Yeah.
And I know there's typically already quite a bit of traffic crossing the street for the different businesses and whatnot. And, not totally unrelated to you, but I do believe we had a fatality about 8 years ago. Someone crossing 38 from Donna's in that area, so. So anyway, I just wanted to voice those concerns.
I understand.
And basically just make you aware of them.
And, through the chair, I mean, in some sense, if something's gonna go there, right? Ultimately, probably somebody's gonna develop this parcel, right? There was a plan that was previously approved by this board, I think a mixed-use development. Ultimately, somebody's gonna develop this parcel. Frankly, having a cannabis business is an ideal developer for the parcel, because we're so beholden to the host community and the Cannabis Control Commission, and, any reasonable, condition of the permit, of the host community agreement, we're going to accept, right? So, and we have all of our cameras available to your local law enforcement 24 hours a day. We have on-site, security. It's actually a really good tenant, as opposed to maybe somebody puts a quick bagel and coffee shop in there to sort of complement the donuts at Donna's or something, and they have 3 times as much traffic, and they're not beholden to all the same things that we are at the local level. So in some sense, and I understand the arguments both ways, but in some sense, the cannabis use is actually an ideal use for an area like this, where there's some concern as to what kind of business can go in there, just because we're so beholden to the host community, and we're so willing to accept any reasonable conditions. But just sort of, thinking about it from the other side, as opposed to, oh my gosh, it's cannabis, what are we gonna do? It's actually, oh my gosh, thank goodness it's cannabis, because they'll do anything we tell them.
Yeah. Thank you.
I appreciate that. No further comments, Mr. Chairman.
Also. All right, so I guess I understand some of the concern, the potential overlap, but I mean, in terms of clientele and the times they're most likely to come in here, it does seem like it might be an ideal neighbor for Donna's, whose business is so much in the early part of the morning, not necessarily the busiest time for, one of these establishments. It's kind of more of an evening,
after work.
Friday night, Saturday night, as opposed to, 10 a.m. on a Saturday. It doesn't feel like you're gonna have a rush at 10 a.m. while Donna's is. And, you know, as it is right now, Donna's is occupying multiple spaces in terms of what they're generating. That's sort of offset because that's not the case once this happens. It's not, you know, those trips generated in and out of that area right now go away because now you're there. So, I mean, there's other things that are in play in terms of cutting down on what's already going on there because that option goes away. So, you know, I don't, you know, I actually think that it might be the offset in times of the clientele might work out the best. Obviously, we don't know what that other piece of the building's gonna be, so it's a little harder to, you know, forecast everything because you don't know who's going in there and when is their peak time. All you can do is run the numbers and, you know, guesstimate it, but at least for half the building, you know, I think we can. The only other one, and I guess it's sort of, but I know I had asked on the configuration that you had for the road about lining it up with the entrance and whatnot. You didn't mention it, but I didn't know if that's because you couldn't.
You addressed it.
Okay.
I'll admit it's because I forgot, but we did do it. So previously, this was a little bit more this way, and you kind of had a swooping kind of curve here that came right in. What we've done is separate this kind of so it's one intersection here, one intersection here. They're not blending into each other. And otherwise, we added a stop sign and stop bar coming out of this one-way here. So the thought would be that the person coming out is going to stop for the through traffic coming through here. So that way, instead of having 4 directions coming in at once, you're going to have the control coming in here. So we did make a change for that. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, when I had mentioned it before, it was about lining them up, but if shifting it over does a similar.
I will mention, so the issue with moving this, and we can't move this further left because you get the property line and the pavement setback here. The reason we can't really shift this further is there's a telephone pole right next to it right now. And it's if you've worked in construction and you've dealt with electric companies for the past couple of years, it's a very difficult, prolonged process to do anything, especially to move a pole on a state road. So.
But I think what Ian's saying is that we noted the concern and we did address it by actually, instead of pushing them together, we moved them apart further and added a stop sign. So we're not just gonna have all these cars running like how it seemed to be configured before.
Okay.
We tried to segment them.
All right. Well, I mean, in my head, the next concern I would have had is that as those cars are trying to leave, blocking up your ability to get to that left parking area. But we are, I don't see it on here, but I did also mention the thing about making it one way around. And I'm not sure where you came down on that, because if it is one way around, then they wouldn't be going into that left unless they've already figured out they didn't find a space. They'll be coming around and they can take the right and go in there. You don't have to worry about that, trying to get across part. So I don't know where you came down on that either.
So this coming around is one way, coming around the building.
Right.
Right
But
now.
I'm talking about going across in front
But
of
you're
the
talking
building.
about this in front. We did look at that. The problem with that is I don't want somebody to get down here and then they find that, you know, now they need to come all the way back around. You know what I mean? So it would be nice if they could kind of come to a space and turn out and come back. You know what I mean? And I also
probably-
don't want all these people backing out to go to leave that now have to go all the way around the building to get out. Every single person here, when they leave, would have to circumvent the building and get out. You know what I mean? And I don't want this long queue back there. I'd rather get them out quicker, you know?
While I appreciate that, we still have the same problem I'm having with that crossing area though, for the amount of people coming in different directions, trying to get through an offset area, because you've got the lane coming around the back is offset to how you're leaving, which means after you go to that stop sign, you then have to kind of make a right-ish, and then make a left after that to get yourself lined up with the out.
Yeah.
Someone's coming across from in front of the building again, and that's somebody else that's now gonna be in that area. You've also got somebody potentially either trying to get to the left parking lot or out of the left parking lot. You potentially have an awful lot going on in an oddly configured thing that potentially runs the risk of backing people out onto 38, which is the last thing you want. And then I'll also note that we've just told other people the exact same thing about making everything one way for a flow issue for this kind of business. So, you know, I don't know how many we've had now of these, but I'm not 100% sure, but I think if we've had 4 of them, I've now asked 3 of them to make it one way because it makes sense. So, you know, it doesn't put you in a different position than anybody else, because you're into Mr. Fratalia's question before, which is you get to the end of that row and you realize you didn't see a space. You want them to turn around, come back across the front to go over to that left lot, and that makes more sense than just going around, where you could actually make an easier right into that extra parking.
I do see your point. I do.
So I mean, just from a flow standpoint, I feel like you're gonna have the least amount of log jam potential in that odd, because you can't line it up. So if you can't line it up, what's possibly gonna happen when you've got people coming from 4 directions all at once into something that doesn't line up? I mean, that's a concern to me. And the last thing anybody wants is someone backed up out onto 38.
Absolutely, yep.
Who can't get in, who's now blocking up 38, and people are literally losing their minds. So, you know, I would ask you to look again.
Yeah, we can
at
look
the
again.
one way
Certainly.
and all the way around, because I just think it's gonna work better in reality of the way people sort of drive.
Yep.
As opposed to, you know, how it looks on the paper.
Theory is different than reality.
Okay.
Definitely
So
agree.
otherwise, I'm all set.
Yeah, we'll look into that.
So with that, we'll open up to the audience. Anyone in the audience with any questions, comments, or concerns?
So, I'm Kim Mulligan, 23 Hill Street. Just
You gotta take the mic
you.
with you if you wouldn't mind.
My house is right, this one here. So prior to Donna's using this space for their parking lot, we had the spillage coming on Hill Street where people just park. And sometimes they'll block the driveways. So I don't know what can be done about that, but I would imagine, did you say that there'll be fencing on the side of the parking lot? Right here, right?
Let me see. I know that it extends here. So we currently show it ending here. There's not fencing here right now, but we could add it.
Yeah, because you said there'd be a walkway. So I just don't, I would hate to see people using our street to access the new businesses, because it already happens because of Donna's. And where Donna's is going to be squeezed out, it's certain to happen in the future again. So here's my driveway, but I have 3 cars to my house, so we park on this side as well. And there's plenty of cars that park in front of my house constantly. So my property is going to be absorbed by the business pretty much. But also, he can assess cars fly up and down Hill Street. So that needs to be addressed. Someone's got to pay attention to the effect that it will have back there as well. It's not just up front.
Right, but this property doesn't have access out on that road, only Donna's does.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm saying when the traffic is going to be affecting Donna's, it's surely going to affect Hill Street as well. People coming and going. And so if we don't have the fence here and he has a walkway, I just feel like it will invite people.
Okay, so then what you're asking is asking them to put a fence in on the left side of the property, is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Certainly. Well, I mean, just for you guys to take into consideration that Hill Street is going to be affected by the business.
I don't agree that, just because they have enough parking in that facility that's going to allow them to park plenty of cars there. If they didn't have, we have a zoning bylaw that requires so many parking spots there. I kind of think if you put a fence on that side, you're doing yourself an injustice, because I see people pulling into their parking lot and using those 10 spots to go to Donna's. in the morning. Unfortunately, I think you're gonna have that
We'll pretend
regardless
you didn't say
of
that.
whether you like that or not, but, you know, it doesn't make sense to put a fence up there, in my opinion, but I do think it's gonna happen to your property, but they could do it, a twofer, they go to get donuts and they go into the marijuana store as well, so.
Yep, so you also got to understand, we're affected early in the morning, right, when Donna's opens.
I agree.
And then they're stating they're going to have opposite hours. So we're looking at,
I think this is the problem though, is that we kind of have to talk about this property. Your problems are being caused, it sounds like from what you're describing though, they're being caused by what happens at Donna's and the way their customers may or may not park when they lose access to this extra lot they had. But that really can't be a consideration to this property because this property only comes out onto Main Street. The fact that on another street that Donna's has access to, that how their customers react, it really can't be put onto this property, because that's not, the only reason people are using it right now is because there isn't anything there. I mean, unless that was gonna be the case forever, and there was never ever gonna be anything here, that was gonna happen no matter what. That's an issue that you have with Donna's. If their customers are parking somewhere they shouldn't be parking, including in front of your driveway. But it wouldn't appear that anyone from this establishment would be one of those people. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure, I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know what we could tell this establishment to do that would alleviate what you just described.
maybe you can restrict what type of tenant is allowed here.
Right, but the version they gave us for the traffic count is on the heaviest use it could be, if it was even that. But the uses could be anything from there down in terms of how much it might require for parking. They're already in excess of what they need. So what I'm saying is, I'm not sure what else we could tell them to do that would possibly affect what you described with Donner customers parking out on the back road that cuts through that you're on.
Hill Street, right?
Hill Street, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and it probably will, it may be a byproduct of any business that goes here, because once they lose access to using this as part of their parking, no matter what you put there, where do those people go that used to park there that are still going to Donner? So what I'm saying is, it isn't this business, it would be any business on this property. When we zone this, not zone it, when we approved this for whatever we approved it for before, if that were developed, it's the same problem, but there isn't really a relief that we can ask them to do that's gonna stop the people at the business next door from doing that. That's what I mean. You know, if they had an access out on that road too, I could see what you're saying. You know, two businesses accessing out onto Hill Street would be problematic, yes. But they don't have access there, they only have it up to 38. I don't know, unless you have a suggestion, I don't know what we could ask them to do that's gonna stop that from happening.
So I guess you're confident that these parking spots are adequate to serve both businesses, and we don't know what business is going in the other side.
So, I'm sorry, Ms.
If I wait, excuse me, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the applicant's attorney noted, they are willing to make a condition of the site plan approval that they have to come back to the planning board regardless of what the future use is to ensure that there is enough parking and traffic mitigation to accommodate whatever use that is. And like they said, they have planned for the most intense use. So if you were to pick out of our zoning bylaw what is allowed in this district, they picked the most obtrusive one to run the numbers conservatively. But still, they're willing to make a condition that whatever business tenant eventually is proposed for that space, that they do have to come back to this board to ensure that it is compatible with the rest of the
So
site.
you're saying at this point, that's the intention?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, not just the intention, it would be a requirement.
Yeah.
They would have to come back to discuss whatever business is going in next door before they can put whatever business is that goes next door. But to the comment on the fence, I would agree with Mr. Fattalia, with the exception of the extra stuff, that not putting a fence there might be the best bet for now, as long as the fence going to your property that is being proposed does go up to give you the screening and protection that you want. But we could also, you know, reserve the right to revisit a fence there as a condition as well, if we found some reason why it might make sense. But I think Mr. Fattalia's unofficial comment may actually be accurate and may, in fact, alleviate part of the concern you just brought up unofficially and not purposely, of course, that, you know, those spaces may not be used for what they're supposed to be used for. If you understand what we're saying. If you put the fence up, that is never going to happen. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah. Ed Doucette, Hill Street. I'm not in a butter, but you kind of answered my question already about the not putting the allness onto the new tenants that are gonna, and I'm glad that they're putting something in there, but 10 spaces is not gonna cut it for what the Adonis overflow is right now. And I know that's not on you guys, but do we have any remedy whatsoever as a resident of Hill Street to maybe get some no parking put up over there, or?
So I would direct you to the Board of Select.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I would not direct you there. I would direct you to the Select Board.
Okay.
Because I keep saying the wrong thing. So they would probably be your best bet for starting that process.
Right.
Just, we don't have any control over that here.
Right, no, and I understand it's not this person's, requirement to be doing.
I would also recommend reaching out to the traffic unit of the police department. They work closely with the DPW to find if no parking signs or similar things are appropriate for certain areas.
Yeah, because, I remember in the past where we've had problems, and people get a good head of steam coming down Hill Street, and, you get kids and stuff over there. Donna's, I don't want to see Donna's be affected at all, because they're a great business to have too, but a question I had that was probably brought up at another meeting, and this is the first one I've been to, is the lighting of the building. Is that gonna affect us in the neighborhood?
So I'll let you can comment.
Sure, so one of the things that we're submitting in the next couple of days is a photometric plan, but we'll make sure to follow the bylaw. We'll have no nuisance from the light. We're gonna use down shielded wall packs essentially is the idea. But we're submitting a photometric plan for engineering peer review, and they'll certainly consider whether we're creating a light nuisance to our neighbors as part of that review. It's probably the main thing they're gonna look at. And so we're totally aware of that issue, and we're gonna make sure our photometric plan does not bother you guys.
And just as far as the fencing goes, if there is a fence put up, my opinion, I'm not in a butter, but my opinion is it should at least match the height of the fence that Donna's has put up already, which I believe is 8 feet.
Well, we did discuss that last time, at the last meeting, where we said, in the event that the abutters are interested in a fence that was higher, we'd be amenable to, granting a waiver to allow it to be higher if that's what people want. But I'll let you folks sort of discuss that amongst yourselves and come back with an answer at some point, because by the time we get around to approving this, I don't want to keep having someone ask this question without us getting an answer on where we want to go on the height of the fence.
Absolutely. So I've been in communication with Ms. Mulligan a couple times over the last couple weeks, and we wanted to come. I wanted to send her this plan earlier today, but I was like, well, let's get the board's feedback first, in case there was something that the board wanted us to change, and then I would send that to her. So, but I will be reaching out to her tomorrow. I don't know if she has time, and with the plan and discussing, what they want. We talked to our landscape architect, and they thought something too imposing would actually be kind of an irritant to the abutters behind there. So the trade-off was 6 feet with the big tree plantings, but we don't mind going up to 8 if that's absolutely the will of the abutters, and so we're going to reach out to them and figure it out.
So this is the other, and this is where we get into the renderings. If you could if you want to or can come up with a rendering of how it's going to look from them looking towards your, because on the flat, plan, it's hard to see what that means. So if you show them a 6-foot fence with the trees put in, and what they see is something that they like, then they may not want the 8-foot fence. But if you show it to them, they say, no, I'm still gonna be staring at something I'd rather not see. I'd rather look at the taller fence than X. Then at least then they've got a rendering that shows them kind of what they're gonna be looking at. Whereas, those trees don't mean anything to somebody the way they are on that plan.
Yeah, we've talked about this, and it's something on our list, so I think we should be able to provide that too.
All right.
Yep.
Another thing real quick, I'm sorry, I don't mean to take up more time, but where you guys were talking about making it one-way traffic pattern going
Yeah.
around the building.
Yep.
Who's responsible for any kind of trash? I mean, is somebody going to be keeping an eye on that? Because you know how that goes, you know, driving around the back of a building, kids are throwing stuff out the window, whatever, you know? And then it ends up.
I'm sure
on
it'll be
our-
something these guys have to maintain on a
Right.
regular basis with
Right,
security
that's-
guys and so forth.
And as pointed
staff.
out by one of the other applicants for a similar business, that the cameras that are required for
true.
these
Okay, all right.
make these sites a little less of a place where you want to be doing those kind of things.
Shenanigans free zone.
Because, yeah, you're going to find yourself on a camera, your license plate and everything else, so it's not really your best bet.
Did I hear you guys saying earlier that there's also security on site?
They're required to have security.
That's a requirement of the, okay, licensing, all right. Excellent, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, comments, or concerns? Once, twice? All right, back to the board. So, we have the 27th?
Yes.
Okay. So, we've got
Is that enough time for you guys, or you think you need another couple?
No, I think that's great. I believe that we should be able to get every punch list item that we've had from the two departments and from the last hearing and this hearing submitted by Wednesday. Yeah, that's the plan. So you should have everything, and that gives, you know, over 10 days for peer review. So we hope that would be sufficient.
Yeah, good, what is?
Mrs. Bowden, is this something that you envision that we need to have them look at the traffic, or is this sufficient?
It's entirely up to you folks.
I don't know.
You know, this hasn't been submitted to the engineering division yet, because as they mentioned, this is a limited package for your benefit that they submitted on Friday, just so they can show, you know, substantial progress in addressing the comments, and they do plan to have a full package for review, apparently on Wednesday, and that's when the engineering division will receive that. I imagine they could conceivably make similar
Rather than just
comments.
telling you now, but I'll give you the heads up that there's a decent chance the engineering department's gonna say, we want this checked, so you may wanna start planning for that. But, you know, I'd be a little surprised if after they get the full thing, if they haven't had a chance to comment yet, that they're gonna say that. So, we can wait and see, but it's up to you guys.
And typically, you know, the IT recommendation, sort of the, you know, what's custom is that when you have what's a relatively low impact, less than 100 vehicle trips on a peak hour, it doesn't necessarily require further traffic analysis, but we'll obviously leave that up to engineering. But that's sort of custom and also the IT recommendation on this issue.
Well, I mean, it's again, it's one of those things, and this is new.
Yep.
So how everybody sort of reacts to it, you know, and making sure everything's sort of squared is the more likely reason that would happen, not so much because of the requirements.
Yep.
But because we make it a requirement.
I understand.
So, all right, so then we've got the 27th, so do we have a motion to continue this to 7:15 on 3/27?
So moved.
The motion made and second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries.
Thank you to the
Thank
chair
you.
and members of the board. Thanks, Alex.
Moving on to agenda item I, 1693 Shawshene Street. This is continued from our 227 meeting.
Thanks for waiting.
God damn, I can't.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Good evening. I'm going to let Brian Goudreau from Hancock set up, but while he does that, I'll just reintroduce myself. I'm Dave Gianetta, owner and CEO of Collective Premium Cannabis. Just as a refresher, we are currently operational in 2 locations here in Mass, one in Littleton, one in Billerica. We attended the February 27th hearing. Since then, we provided on March 7th revised plans and comments. On the 9th, Planning Board responded with their comments, and on the 10th, Engineering with their comments. What we'd propose that, what we'd like to do this evening with you is address any comments that were not considered addressed. We'd like to address those comments that are still outstanding and just provide our response to that, if that's okay with the board.
All right?
Okay, so I'm going to start with the the planning board letter that we received on the 9th. Just want to make a note, number 2, traffic report is pending submittal. We do intend on submitting that either tomorrow or Wednesday. It'll be a full traffic report, so all the readings occurred from Thursday to Saturday, peak times, and we intend on providing that in the next day or two. For whatever it's worth, I do still, without the report in hand, would like to also offer real data based on actual operation, which I don't feel is redundant to the conversations that you've heard previous. Whether someone was operational, I don't feel as though that was really explained. So our opinion, when we do our own assessment, without a traffic study, without an engineer, this is just coming from an operator's perspective, we base it on population. And population of the town typically will result in how many customers you would expect in a day on average. Billerica, 45,000 person population, right off Route 3, so high traffic area, across from a mobile gas station and a drive-through Dunkin' Donuts. We see on average about 500 customers per day, okay? Tewksbury is, my understanding is right around 31,000 population, and Littleton is 12,000 population. Littleton, we see 200 customers per day. It's very relative to your town's population. Billerica and Littleton, we only have one store in each of the towns. So no other competition within the towns. High likelihood that a resident of those towns will come to our store instead of leaving the town and going to a different store. Tewksbury, 31,000, population among 3 stores that will be permitted. Our guesstimate would be that our location would see somewhere in the area of about 350 customers a day, somewhere right in between the other 2 that I just mentioned. Open for 10 hours a day on average, based on the bylaw, other than Sunday, of course. We're talking 35 to 40 customers per hour. And as I mentioned in the previous hearing a couple weeks ago, our experience is that we see customers in and out in about 4 to 5 minutes. Okay, so we're talking getting an average of 35 to 40 customers through when each customer is in and out in 4 minutes. So traffic today does not really become a thing. And as I mentioned, Billerica, very, very highly populated area, right on Republic Road there. So for whatever that's worth, I just want to lay that
Can I ask
out.
you one question along those lines, though?
Sure.
For your site, we can't predict exactly how many, the select board may or may not approve. They
Sure.
go up to 3. Just presuming that maybe you're the only one that they decide to permit.
Mhm.
How do you account for the potential of the 2 towns that also don't have it closest by, Wilmington and the one that shall not be named, and their folks also coming here? How does that maybe change your number?
Yep.
So that we might have a more realistic.
Totally fair.
Because 300 is what you're basing. If it's just us,
Yep.
obviously, neither of those two folks have it, so they may come too.
Absolutely, and
Chairman, along those same lines, Route 93 is not far from your
Correct.
establishment as well. I think we
Correct.
have to take that into consideration as well.
100%. So comparatively, comparably, Billerica, let's just focus on that for one moment. Route 3, highly traveled. That off-ramp at Treble Cove Road sees about 100,000 counts a day, cars a day. Similarly, Carlisle, Bedford, Burlington, Chelmsford, thank you, all do not have stores within their towns. Shifting over to Littleton, we're right off Route 495. And similarly, Groton, as of now, they're about a year out, I would say. Westford, Harvard, Acton, all opted out. So very similar discussion, and these are the actual counts. And we just hit our 1-year mark last week for both locations. So this is, true data. We've experienced our ramp up. It's just where it stands today. okay, without a traffic report. But we will have one, that we can speak to. Okay, number 3, this one, I think there may have been some confusion. Section 3.6.4C.10 states that a dumpster on site must be fully enclosed. Currently, there is no dumpster on the site plan. There may have been some confusion here. It appears as though that there's an implication that we intend on having interior refuse storage. We do intend on having a dumpster on site. We do intend on having it inside our delivery. We call them Sally ports, but the enclosed area where we'll take in secure delivery of our product. So right where Brian is pointing, so within the screened in by a fence area, we'll have a dumpster there. That dumpster by CCC regulation must be locked at all times. So therefore, even if it wasn't screened, no trash is flying out of it because the cover is down, the bar's up, and it's locked. It has to be. We have to unlock and, lock anytime we use it. Okay, so I just wanted to make a clarification on that. We will note that on the next plan for submission, that will be on the plan. The next comment that required a response was number 8. This is talking about curbing between all paved and landscaped areas. We are proposing flush curbing because of existing grades. And when doing so, we're proposing to have bollards in place so that a vehicle wouldn't drive into the building. We won't have a raised curb to stop that from happening, so instead we're putting bollards in place. And so it appears as though this would require a waiver. So we would propose that the planning board waive the adherence to this provision and allow us to use bollards opposed to a raised curb. Bollards would actually probably protect it better than a curb would.
And what's the reason for that again? The flush curbing?
Go ahead, for ADA, I believe, but go ahead.
Yeah, so it's an existing building. There were overhead doors there, so the concrete slab of the building is at the grade of the parking lot. So we couldn't introduce a curb because we'd be picking up 6 inches from the interior elevation to then go down 6 inches in the parking lot. So it's essentially flush out. And that's where the bollards come in, strategically located to make sure that they're traffic barriers.
So basically, your sidewalk becomes a speed bump, if you would have put it in.
Raised,
Yeah. The next section was, our comment was number 12. This is requiring parking lot with 8 or more spaces to have bicycle racks. We are proposing that the planning board waive the adherence for the need of a bicycle rack for this location. And
Why is that?
so my response to that would be twofold. One would be just given the area, in my opinion, I don't see too many bicycles traveling down. It's a very heavily, as you know, industrial area.
Lots of cars.
Lots of cars, tractor
trucks.
trailers, I wouldn't see it. However, a point very specific to cannabis would be anti-diversion. And what I mean by that is someone on a bicycle has an easier ability to get away if they were to do something that they shouldn't be doing, opposed to a car. In my opinion, you're welcoming people to maybe plan for that, have a place to have their bike ready to go. We've never seen bicycles in Billerica. We've never seen bicycles in Littleton. It's just not common. It just, you don't see it happening. And if it were, if someone parked their bike, we would actually pay very close attention to them because it's very out of the norm for
Plus, you have to be 21 years old to get into the facility.
Correct. Okay. And so 14B, we would be, so this is to suggest that the freestanding sign that we're proposing is within the right-of-way. What we're proposing is for the planning board to waive the strict adherence to this section and allow for our freestanding sign to be 10 feet from the right-of-way opposed to the bylaw, which says 15 feet. And I would just note that there are no municipal utilities under the location of the proposed freestanding sign. And then the last comment on this letter was the, this actually defers to the review letter from DPW. And this talks about the construction of sidewalks. And so what we had proposed is that, well, let me just read it, I guess, on the other. And I do realize that this is something that we would need to take up with engineering, I believe. DPW. Or DPW. But, you know, similar to another applicant, in lieu of construction, we had proposed a financial contribution. We did just do this with Billerica. They did accept that in our special permit approval. Couple of years ago, we just dropped the check off, actually 2 weeks ago. But we would also propose, which is a little different, that this work would be done within a 5-year timeframe of occupancy. And it seemed as though engineering had a concern of pedestrian safety when doing this. And what we would propose to that is that we would do the work either before or after operational hours, just to the comment of pedestrian safety. So we wouldn't be interfering with that. So I'm going to move away from the planning board letter and address the comments on the engineering letter. So number one in engineering, this refers to restoring the existing property back to what was approved in, I believe it was 2012 plans, or I'm sorry, a 2014 as-built plan. In the comments, it says that the engineering division recommends the site be restored to the condition of the approved plans and special permit before any further modifications are made. So what we're proposing is, rather than doing this 2 different times, the work there at the property, what we're proposing is that, I'll just read it verbatim what we've put here. So propose to the engineering division that a condition be set forth in the decision for the applicant to restore the site to the condition of the approved plans and special permit while simultaneously completing the work in the site plan application. All work will be plotted on a certified as-built plan and submitted to the planning board and engineering division for their approval prior to an occupancy permit being issued by the building commissioner. So we would propose that all work be done at the same time, so we're not, you know, doing this work multiple times. It's going to slow the whole process of opening up the store, bringing revenue to the town. So that's why we would ask that we be able to do it in that fashion. Number 2 of the engineer's letter is that just looking for the annual inspection and maintenance reports. Assuming we're going to continue this hearing, we would provide that at the next hearing of the 27th of this month. Number 3, it says here that the engineering department defers to the building commissioner on the appropriateness of a mixed-use parcel. So my comment here is that where the lot is zoned appropriately for mixed use and as its intended use, we would just propose that the planning board accept the proposed use that's in place. What I would like to note to that is that the existing use by the contractor, so MDR Construction, will be minimized as you can see in our plans, 2 of the existing contractor bays are now going away. That's going to be given to our space that we're going to convert to our use. In addition to that, majority of the trucks used by the existing operator are intended to be relocated to another location that is in Andover. So, we would just hope that that would just be, not have to be shuffled down to the building commissioner and it just stay here in this board.
I can address that. So when there's more than one allowed use on the site, as long as you have enough parking to accommodate both, it's not a problem.
Okay. And we have displayed that in our plan. Okay. Okay, so number 4, the applicant shall demonstrate how loading vehicles will be able to maneuver to the loading dock while the parking lot is fully occupied. And this is in reference to us relocating one of the overhead doors. As you may recall, we're relocating to the rear of the building instead of our side of the building. And when doing so, it looks like the engineering department would like to see, how loading vehicles will be able to maneuver. This is attainable, and we will display this on a plan for the next hearing on the 27th. In addition to that, number 5, with regards to the swept path analysis, the swept path analysis that we did provide in the existing plan is based on the larger apparatus than the spec sheet from the fire department. So, because, let me step back, engineering department had suggested that there are new equipment that could be larger. So what we've used is a vehicle that's even larger than that.
Yeah, so basically, we didn't have the cut sheet of the largest apparatus, we now do, and that apparatus is actually smaller than the swept path analysis that we had submitted previously, so we're just revising it and reissuing that.
Okay, the next one is number 6. This goes back to the sidewalks. We did discuss that. And that covers it.
All right, so I'll just save everybody the trouble, but I'll make the same comment in the other hearing, which is speak to, the town engineer and find out which way they want to go on the sidewalks. If they tell you they're going to go in, that's the answer. If they tell you that they'd love to take the fee in lieu of because they know where they want to put it, I'm sure we'd be more than happy to accommodate their request. But it's really, get an answer from them and then bring it back to us.
Fair enough. Yeah, we'll work with them between now and the next
I
hearing.
just don't want to give people marching orders and then that contradicts what they hear from somebody else.
Understood.
All right, we'll start with Mr. Chairman.
So I understand your concern about the bike rack. Tewksbury is a green community, and how dead set against having a bike rack are you? Is it truly detrimental to your business?
It's not detrimental.
And the only reason I say that is because right now, the bike rack isn't necessarily similar to the stretch code that it's not about what we're doing today, it's about where we want to be 10, 20 years from now. We want to be fully sidewalk, we want to have bike lanes, we want to have, I forget the term, but they're basically multi-use streets, all of that. So it is about, and we can't go back and send letters to all the businesses 10 years from now and say, hey, go put in bike racks, just like we can't go tell them all to go put in EV charging or anything like that. So, unless you're really, really dead set against it, I'm not inclined to allow for a waiver for the bike rack, and for reasons I just stated. The signage waiver, I think, is fine, and I'm not gonna go through all of them, because again, some of them are not in our purview, and others are between you and engineering mostly. And that's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Fowler?
I think you covered.
Well, we don't get to talk to them about sidewalks, because that's not our.
No, I think you covered those things that I would discuss, the sign being one of them. So I'm all set.
Mr. Duffy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To expand on Mr. Champa's comment a little bit about the bike rack, I'm typically not in favor of bike rack waivers either, and again, it's not today, it's 5 years, it's 10 years from now. Now, maybe some kind of a little, an idea, if you have space for it, so yeah, I understand that, the bad guys might come in on a bike and do their thing and try to get away, as they do, try. But it might be an employee that might want to ride a bike to work too during the good weather. Oftentimes, buildings are putting a space where an employee could keep a bike inside and maybe have like a changing area or, I don't know if you're gonna have a shower or whatever for employees, something along those lines. But, that type of green building in a green community like Tewksbury, it makes a little bit of a statement there too, and it tells us where you're at. So I would say, I understand that, your everyday customer is not gonna be pedaling in on a bike, most likely. I get that today, but, down the road, so I'm gonna say if you can fit it, what are we talking, a bike rack holds 5 bikes, 6, 7, 8 bikes, whatever, it's not a big deal. So I would like to see the bike rack somewhere, inside or out, either for your employees or for potential customers, and so that's where I would stand on that. I think it's a good idea to put the curbing flush for ADA access and just general tripping hazards, in the bollards. I'm perfectly okay with that. And I'm perfectly okay with the sign waiver. And good luck with DPW on the sidewalk, and we're gonna defer to them,
Thank you.
okay?
Mr.
That's all I
Patel.
have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a very busy road, I mean, you've been there, so I don't know how somebody would come down there with a bike either, to tell you the truth. It's taking their life in their hands, but driving down there is bad enough, but, so we're gonna probably be looking for a traffic peer review because of the location and you haven't given us anything yet, so that's gonna be probably coming as well. Are you looking for a message board at the site?
Yes. So a combination of the two. It would be this is in the packet.
I see it in the packet, just,
Yep, so it would be a freestanding sign.
Yep.
And it would be a combination of our logo at the top and then a message board underneath that.
Okay, do you have those at your other facilities?
We don't. We don't only because we don't have the opportunity to, not because it's, frowned upon or anything like that. But it's simply because it's just not
I thought
attainable.
there was something in the regulation that you not have advertising signs outside of the, or something like that, on the windows or something like that, or?
Are you saying the Cannabis Control Commission regulations?
Yes.
So the regulation states that you have to be able to prove that your audience is 85% or more 21 plus. So when we have a billboard on Route 3, which we do, no different than a sign, especially at our establishment, where majority of the people pulling in would be inclined to be 21 plus.
I would say pulling in, yes, but driving by may not be the case, but.
Is that what he's looking
Yeah, it's a CCC regulation where you've seen the billboards I'm talking about, the digital ones.
Yeah, I've seen
On
them
Route
the
3,
road.
on 495, 93,
Yeah.
all interstates
Yeah.
throughout the Commonwealth. So we land on 3 sides along Route 3.
Yeah.
2 sides in Lowell at the Cross Point building and 1 up at the Tingsboro line.
Okay.
Heading southbound. And we had to, with Outfront is the name of the company who handles the billboards.
Yep.
They provide data to us that shows us that based on the traffic, however they do it, that we can prove that 85% or more are 21 plus. So the same theory would also, relate to this here as well with anybody driving by.
So I have a problem, I think, with that. What would you be advertising on the sign? For a message board? It's a message board saying, say you're having, Red Spider on sale this week or something?
I would probably say, no, I got a good one. I would say Toys for Tots, drop off here. We did that in Littleton, and we got a ton of toys, 164 toys this year.
Okay.
And we had an A-frame message board out on the road.
Good. Yeah, but I'm saying with a regular electronic message board, what would you have on, other than that? Just, okay, one, you know, for one time frame is Toys for Tots.
Something like that. We would also maybe, refer to events that we do. So like in Littleton, we do in the summers, spring and summers, we do a car night. So classic car night every third Thursday. So we would advertise the car night that's, coming into the, bring in all your classic cars. We host a 3-4 hour window from say 3 to 7. We have a DJ, we have, fun things to drive more activity to our location. It's not what you're
I
thinking.
understand what you're saying. First of all, I don't think that location warrants or would allow of, that many vehicles coming in besides what you have there. You have a limited amount of parking and all that. If you were at a strip mall, it'd be one thing, but I mean, having a car show there or something with people, I don't think it's, I don't know. I just, I thought I seen the sign, the message board sign, and I think I'd have a problem voting for that and maybe not allowing the waiver as far as allowing the sign with the message board. I mean, I'd probably allow a sign, basic sign. Message board would probably be something I'd have to rethink on my end, so, but that's just something that I did pick up on. So I know you're doing a lease agreement with the owner, right?
Yes.
So is there a number of years attached to that?
10-year lease, 2 5-year options.
Okay, great. What I'm not looking for is somebody to go in with a 1-year lease, 2-year lease, and say, okay, after
100%.
2 years, now we gotta reopen the establishment.
That's our standard lease agreement that we propose, and
10 years, 5 and 5.
10 years, 5-5.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. All right, with that, I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Just to pick up on Mr. Fatalia's question on the message board. You told us what you'd put on there for special messages. You have a car show or whatever. So my question, and I think it was actually the one I think Mr. Fatalia was really looking for, is when you're not advertising for some special event, what would be on the board?
Some like sayings, things to draw people in, we can't have sales per se. We can't advertise that by regulation, so that's not what would show up on there. Things like just fun sayings, honestly. It's not anything more than just an eye catcher for somebody to if they're happen to drive by and they didn't see that we're a retail dispensary, maybe that catches their eye, maybe it makes them laugh, makes them smile, and then they turn in. It wouldn't be sales. We can't put dollar amounts on any type of advertising. You'll get shut down for that. So I'm sorry if I'm not answering the question.
No, it's not that.
I can't answer it, so specific. I can only answer it according to what we have done on that more traditional A-frame. Where that's how we've done it in Littleton, and that's how we've done it in Littleton, Billerica. Come get your gift cards inside, that's another one, things like that on Valentine's Day or Christmas or what have you. Things like that. It's not to advertise product,
I guess
that's for certain.
I'll put it this way. I'm by far the easiest person to convince on this board, the message boards, generally. I just am, because I just, it's 2023, not 1903.
Sure.
So I don't have a problem with them in general. But I also see the point here where, and I don't mean this to sound flippant, if it comes off that way, I'm sorry if it does. But it sounds more like you're asking for it because you could ask for it, but you haven't really thought about it in advance as to why it is you really want it, because you couldn't really explain it just now because you have no idea what you really want to put on it. So it's not like you've done it the other way around where you're like, oh, I've got these big plans and here they are. The only way I can make them happen is if I have a message board. It's sort of looking at it like, well, Tewksbury allows those and they've allowed them before. I'd like a message board and then I'll figure out what I'm gonna do, kind of thing. And so when you hear some of the concern about maybe approving it, when I'm the easiest person to convince most of the time, I didn't feel convinced there, you know what I mean? So I'm not sure where that's gonna get you. I'm not saying you can't come back in with a better, pitch maybe, and, maybe minds will be changed. But that's what I'll tell you right now is that, I'm not sold on it right now. And if you haven't got me, you got a ways to go, is my guess. So,
I guess if I could I add to that, Mr. Chairman, too, I guess because there is, as we mentioned earlier, some unknowns with retail marijuana stores opening up, that we might be, not even really know what the right question to ask is, and I don't know that, other than the size and the backlighting and so on and so forth, I don't know that the planning board has a lot of control over what actually gets said on those signs. And so that being the case, if I was driving by there with my grandkids and there was a big pot plant lit up, you know what I mean, a bunch of green leaves, if we have no idea what is going on what's gonna go on the signboard, then the defense mechanism is gonna kick in to say, hey, we don't know what's going on that signboard, so maybe we shouldn't approve the signboard, or approve the waiver, should I say. So, yeah, I'm thinking that if you're gonna have a signboard, and you're gonna be putting things on the signboard, that it would be, to your advantage to be thinking along, to have some examples of things that you would put up there that might be, friendly to anybody that might be driving by your store, I guess. Nobody wants to see, Cheech and Chong puffing away up there, you know what I mean? So.
If I may.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, because we don't know and because we can't control what you put on that sign.
I don't want to get too bogged down in this.
No,
Like
and
said,
I don't
You want
either.
to talk about it, Ms. Louder?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of clarifying notes and closing, just to kind of close up the sign discussion. I misunderstood that this was intended to be a traditional electronic message board sign. That has a whole different set. I understand it says that. I kind of, just the way the rendering looked, it didn't trigger the typical electronic message board sign that we typically see. So I'm going to re-review that to make sure that it meets those requirements, because those are slightly different than your typical freestanding sign. And to Mr. Duffy's comment, there are the significant case law about the content of signs, and we really shouldn't be going down that road of trying to regulate the messaging, particularly if it doesn't incite harm, then they're kind of okay. But yeah, so I guess my only other question to the board would be, Mr. Gianetta noted that they plan to have their traffic report in the next couple of days. If it is the pleasure of the board to turn that over for a peer review, I can do that very quickly, and we don't have to wait until the next meeting,
Yeah,
if that is something you guys want to
That'll get the
do.
ball rolling. So why don't we
Yeah.
do
Great.
that?
Yep, so I can, whenever I get that from you folks, I can turn it right over to a peer reviewer, and we should have results before the next hearing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So with that, I'll open it up to the audience. Anyone in the audience with any questions, comments, or concerns?
Doubt it.
I think not. Bring it back to the board. What is the pleasure of the board? Do we have a motion to continue this till the 27th at 7:20?
So moved.
All right, motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to
Thank you,
agenda
guys.
item-
I want to thank you for your insight that you've given us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right?
Positive.
Great.
You've given
Thank you.
us more insight because you are hands-on already.
Yes, yes, and
So,
I'm there
I wish we
every
had had
day,
you here
by
before.
the way, too. Yeah,
What's a pleasure is the fact that you're giving us numbers and actual numbers.
Yes.
Because we have no idea, really. I haven't never been in a facility. I may take you up on your offer to come
Please
over,
do.
Mr. Duke.
Please do.
But,
really, I mean that.
yeah,
Yeah, I'd like to
we
take
have
you
a
through
lot,
it.
we've had a lot of action so far on this marijuana. We have another one that's coming up on the list for informational meeting coming up
Okay.
soon, so another
Okay.
entity coming in. So
All right,
If we
great.
call the Bill Ricker store and leave a message, that would be the easiest way to get in touch with you.
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Calling the Bill Ricker store, leaving a message to set up a walkthrough, would that be the easiest way to?
Yeah, I had,
I forwarded his contact information to you guys. I can do it again.
Okay, that's right, you did, from
Yeah.
the last meeting. Right.
and I'm more than happy if we want to do a group effort. Anybody who wants to attend, I'm happy
We don't
to.
even talk to each other. We don't even know each other.
We never see each
Can we
other
buy
outside
stuff
of
there
this
too?
3-hour window.
What's that?
Can we buy stuff too?
Buy whatever you want. Tomorrow night is what?
All right,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you, guys. Have a
moving
good
on
night.
to agenda item J. That's 770 Main Street. The applicant requested to be continued, so we have a motion to continue to 7:05.
So moved.
Motion made, or a second?
Second.
Motion made, second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. All right, that brings us to old business. Any old business?
I just have one quick thing,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman.
There's 2 inches of snow out there already, come on.
Old business, quickly. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I was just curious, I was thinking about the sycamore tree presentation that we had, and I was just curious, I had asked if the applicant would provide a cut sheet with the information that he explained to us, you know, from the arborist in New Hampshire that he was gonna buy the tree from and so forth. I was just wondering if there was any follow-up on that.
There hasn't been any submissions to date yet. I can follow up on that tomorrow.
Okay, thank you,
Jim,
appreciate
do you
that.
really need that? Just,
Cut sheet?
yeah, well,
Yeah, absolutely, for the record, why not?
okay.
Yeah.
Just give me.
Well, because we're not gonna see that tree for a while, so we
No,
might as well
right.
get that in there, I mean, that's something. All right, so that takes us to new business. There's only one new business item, I'll try to do it really quick, but I don't know if anybody else saw it or not, but the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, basically, and I'll do it as quickly as I can, said that during the public comment, people can say whatever they wanna say. That's basically what they said, and we can't stop them. So, you know, that thing we do at town meeting when they say be polite, or we'll tell you you can't talk anymore, that's out. So once they're up there and able to speak, they can pretty much say whatever they want, call us whatever they want, and I cannot stop them, okay? They yell out in the audience, I can, because that's not their public time to talk. But once they're up at the
Oh, yeah.
podium, I can't stop what they say, no matter how
But if they wanna-
foul and awful it might
Yeah.
be. Because the example given in the case was, the chairman of that committee was referred to as a Hitler. So
Yeah,
it's
I
pretty
read
much
that.
a free-for-all.
Yeah, I read that.
So what I decided, and I sent in and had town council look at, is a consideration, we'll see how things go, but it's sitting in my back pocket, which is a change to how we do things, which would be simply a 3-minute limit on public comment. You make your comments, you ask your questions, we do not interact. Once you're done, we'll comment on whatever needs to be commented on or get answers to questions, but if we start where people decide they're gonna come in and take advantage of the ability to go off the rails, I'm gonna institute that and hold to that for all hearings from there on out to limit the likelihood that that goes on indefinitely. They'll have their time, just as they're required to have. They'll have their free comment, which they are entitled to, so says the SJC. And I will not limit that or anything in terms of what they want to say during their time. But I'm going to keep those times to a very short leash if that's the case.
So you're saying if they get up here and they want to talk about something that you tell them that we can't say already?
So even if they go off
That's
topic,
town meeting,
or
right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, but I mean, if they want to use it to talk about a topic that's off,
No, it's our meeting.
if it's a topic that's off what we discussed,
They
I'm not
vent
sure
for
if that's
3
the
minutes
same
and we
thing.
ignore it.
It's not, I don't know if that's the
Yeah,
same
right.
thing as telling them that they can't use language or
No.
refer to us as whatever they want. I don't know if that's the same thing. What I read in that thing was basically saying that they can call us any name in the book, and we can't use that as a reason to cut them off. If it means they can come up and talk about the color of the sky during their 3 minutes, I don't know if that's really what that meant.
I think if you were to choose, like I had mentioned to you after speaking with town council, if you choose to implement a time limit, then in the interest of not allowing people to use their time allotment, we wouldn't stop them if they do go off topic or if they do start to veer into territory that may not be applicable. So the answer to that would be either we continue to conduct business the way we have been and things are going fine, or if we do implement the time limit, as Mr. Chairman noted, we would let everybody, let the folks get through their comments, get through their questions, and then afterwards, the board or the applicant may be able to respond and address those items. And that could be the time to say, yes, you mentioned X, Y, and Z, however, that is not a part of this public hearing, but you let them say it. So it's kind of a trade-off.
That'll be the trade-off. If I
Yeah.
have to implement this, then it's gonna be, you say what you want for your 3 minutes. But
Right.
use your time however you
Yeah.
choose.
Right.
Then and we're not required, the back and forth we do, we're not required to do.
Right.
We're only supposed to let them talk.
Yeah.
We could just move on. We
Yeah.
don't do that because we like to try to interact and get people answers and whatnot.
Sure.
If you spend your 3 minutes on things that have nothing to do with what we're gonna talk about, I'm just simply gonna move on.
I believe at
That'll be
town
that.
meeting, it's 5 minutes you have the floor.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's where I kinda got it from,
Right.
but town meeting also used to have that,
Right.
don't be rude, basically, or we're gonna
Right.
cut you off. They're not gonna be able to do that anymore. So enjoy next town meeting, I suppose.
All right.
Correspondence, we have one correspondence, Mr. Fratelli mentioned it, it's another one of the public meetings for proposed marijuana. And other than that, we are done, so that'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
The motion made, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried. See you on the 27th.
10:50.